and welcome to My Baseball History. I'm your host, Dan Wallach. My Baseball History is a long-form interview podcast where each episode I'll talk to someone new who has some sort of association to the game of baseball. No matter who I talk to, we'll talk about how they fell in love with baseball, how their career started, and how they got to be where they are today. On today's episode, I spoke with Jay Valentine, who patrolled center field in 1977 and 1978 for the Indianapolis Clowns, the last of the Negro League baseball teams. After graduating high school in December of 1975, Jay accepted an invitation to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where he attended spring training and played in the Florida Instructional League with the Yankees and the Orioles. It was there, from a happenstance throwaway comment made by a teammate, where Jay first heard of the Indianapolis Clowns. Tracing their origins back as far as we can, there's evidence indicating that the team was formed in Miami, Florida in 1935 or 1936 by Hunter Campbell and bootlegger Johnny Pierce, and was known at that time as the Miami Giants. On July 4th, 1936, the team played 5 games, one at 10 a.m., the next at 2 p.m., the third at 6 p.m., and then a doubleheader that started at 8:45 p.m. From very early on, it was clear that this team would do whatever it took to make it work. By 1941, they were calling themselves the Miami Ethiopian Clowns, but when the team became an independent barnstorming club, they shortened that to just the Ethiopian Clowns. Sid Pollock was instrumental in promoting and popularizing the Clowns and developed them into a nationally known combination of show business and baseball. While still fielding a legitimate team, the Clowns also toured with several members known for comic acts, sort of a baseball version of the Harlem Globetrotters, including Joe Prince Henry. In 1943, the team relocated to Cincinnati, where they became the Cincinnati Clowns. That same year, they joined the Negro American League, where they would play through the 1954 season. The team operated between Cincinnati and Indianapolis in 1944 and 1945, before officially moving to just Indianapolis full-time in 1946. As the Negro Leagues declined in the late 1940s after the integration of Major League Baseball, the Clowns continued operations on barnstorming tours into the 1960s. The team had relocated again in 1951, this time from Indianapolis to Offerman Stadium in Buffalo, New York, but they kept the Indianapolis Clowns name for the rest of their existence. While playing in the Independent League, the Clowns won their first league championship in 1950. They joined the Negro American League the next year and won 3 of the next 4 championships in 1951, 1952, and 1954. The Clowns left Buffalo after the 1955 season, and by 1967, they were the last of the Negro League's teams still playing. Jay Valentine joined the team in 1977, not only playing center field but also participating in the show that season and the following year in 1978. After playing with the Clowns, Jay attended Sioux Empire College for 2 years, where he played for former New York Yankee and World Series champion Bob Cerv. Jay finished his college career at Sioux Falls College, which is now the University of Sioux Falls, where he majored in communications and theater. Over their years as a team, the Clowns played in every state in the U.S., as well as Canada, Mexico, Cuba, and Puerto Rico. The largest crowd the team ever played in front of was 41,127 fans in Detroit, but the smallest crowd was only 35 fans in Lubbock, Texas. We should cut them some slack, though, because there was an active tornado happening during the game, which probably scared most fans away. Still, 35 decided to show up. The Clowns once played in a town with a population of just 476 people, yet somehow managed to bring out 1,372 fans to the game. They were beloved everywhere they went, and made fans happy all over the continent. The Clowns continued to play exhibition games as a barnstorming team until they finally disbanded in 1989. But not before they made history and broke barriers for more than half a century. In this episode, we covered lots of ground. Jay tells us what the travel conditions and lodging accommodations were like for an underfunded barnstorming team whose players were making only a few dollars a day. We find out about Birmingham Sam Bryson, Indianapolis's clown prince while Jay was with the team, who Jay called the best ball player he ever played with. We learn the names of some of the other great Indianapolis Clowns players of the past, from Goose Tatum and John Wyatt to Choo Choo Coleman and Paul Casanova, from Hal King and King Tut to Peanut Johnson and Henry Aaron. And we hear about the trials and tribulations the historically and predominantly black baseball team faced while traveling the country, even as recently as the late 1970s. With all of that information and much, much more coming at you, it may be helpful to follow along with the episode's liner notes on our podcast website. If you're new to the show, don't worry. You'll still be able to enjoy this episode without the extra help from the liner notes. But longtime listeners love the photos and links we put up on the website, which will give you a better understanding of the things Jay and I are discussing, and provide some context when needed. The liner notes can be found on the My Baseball History website, which is online at www.shoelesspodcast.com. If you want to follow along, head to the website where you'll see the Jay Valentine episode listed first on the main page under latest episodes. Click on that and you'll be ready to follow along. There's an embedded media player right on the page, so you don't need to have multiple windows open while you listen or fumble around with multiple devices. If you want to catch up on any of our earlier episodes, you can click on the tabs at the top of the website to go back through past interviews from any of our previous seasons and see a full list of everything we have to offer so far. Everything in the liner notes goes in chronological order of how we talked about them in the interview, so you should easily be able to keep your place as you listen. After the interview, we'll do a recap of what you just heard, adding some extra insight and hopefully answering any questions that may have come up as you listened. I'll also explain how you'll have a couple chances to answer a trivia question to win a prize, so stick around until the end of the episode for that too. But now, here's my interview with the center fielder of the Indianapolis Clowns, Jay Valentine. Tell me a little bit about where you grew up.
Well, I was born in Chillicothe, Ohio, and moved from Chillicothe at the age of, I think it was 7, moved to Oberlin. Living in Chillicothe, my grandfather owned property in it, just like a city block. Mm-hmm. So it was like all of our relatives lived in like a compound kind of thing. Yeah, we pretty much all lived right around each other. As kids, we all played together and that. So it was just kind of one family type thing.
And your dad was one of 10 children, right?
Yes.
And he grew up a Cincinnati Reds fan, but when your family moved to Northern Ohio, he became a Cleveland Indians fan.
Yeah.
What was your favorite team growing up?
Cleveland Indians.
And since your dad was one of 10 children and you were one of 4 boys, there were always lots of gloves kind of just laying around. But you batted left-handed and threw left-handed. Were any of the gloves that were laying around left-handed for you?
No.
So what did you do?
I learned how to catch and throw with the gloves that were built for right-handed people. Uh-huh. So I put the glove opposite on my glove hand. Mm-hmm. And that's how I learned how to catch.
When you were learning how to play and then starting to get a little bit more serious about baseball, did you try to model your game after a particular left-handed professional baseball player?
No, not really. I had too many idols at the time. Mm-hmm. So basically, I was just being myself.
Cool. Who were some of those idols for you?
Vada Pinson, Vic Tavaleo, Mickey Rivers, even Cesar Cedeno. Mm-hmm.
Vada Pinson was a black ball player who was born in Memphis and spent most of his career with the Reds, but he also played for Cleveland, for the St. Louis Cardinals, the California Angels, and the Kansas City Royals. What was it about his shoes that stuck out to you?
It's shiny. He always shined his shoes. So that's one thing I picked up from him, mm-hmm. was I always shined my shoes before a game.
Yeah, it's interesting that as a kid you hang on to those kind of things, and little details like that make somebody your favorite player or make somebody you want to root for. Mm-hmm. The major leagues had been integrated by Jackie Robinson in 1947, and the U.S. Supreme Court declared segregation in public schools unconstitutional with Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954. Little League Baseball prohibited racial discrimination when it was founded in 1939, but in 1955, Little League's rule directly conflicted with Southern laws that prohibited integration. That year, white Little League teams in South Carolina, Florida, and Texas refused to take the field against black teams as a part of a massive resistance to the Brown decision. You were born in 1957 and started playing ball around the age of 7 or 8. When you were growing up, do you remember facing any racism playing ball?
No, not really. Not as a kid. Basically, the most racism that I experienced was probably when I was playing for the Indianapolis Clowns. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I didn't really have to deal much with racism at all.
Great. It does strike me as interesting, though, that your favorite players were all either black like Vada Pinson or Mickey Rivers, or Latin like Davalillo was born in Venezuela, or Louis Tiant, who was born in Cuba. Was that kind of a conscious thing, that those were the people that you gravitated towards as your favorite players?
No, I just followed like Vic Davalillo, for instance. He became one of my favorite players because he came to one of our baseball games when I played baseball.
Oh, neat.
So we were all youngsters. I think it was a 9-year-old team. And the game just like stopped when he showed up. Everybody just stopped playing, and we all gravitated towards him. And he signed autographs and bought gloves and stuff. And then our game proceeded afterwards.
Did he have a kid on the team? Like, why was he there?
It was just passing through.
Cool. By the time you were learning about baseball and playing it yourself, the Negro Leagues didn't exist anymore. But I'm curious, as a black player and more broadly as a black person growing up in America at the time, were you aware of the fact that players like Henry Aaron and Willie Mays and Ernie Banks played in a different league that was specifically for black players before they played in the major leagues?
No, I wasn't familiar with it at the time when I was a kid. I really didn't know anything about integrated baseball until I was like 12, 13 years old. I realized that the blacks couldn't play with the white teams, and that was probably my preteen years.
And when you did learn about it, how did you? Was it books? Were there movies that come? Like, how did that topic get broached?
Basically, like one of my baseball coaches had brought up the fact that Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier and that, and Hank Aaron, and Larry Doby, and those guys. And from then on, I kind of gravitated towards the history of blacks in baseball.
And when your coach told you that, you didn't know baseball as anything other than integrated. So what was your reaction when you heard that 15 years earlier, black people had their entire own league that they weren't allowed to play with the white major leaguers? How did you react to that when you learned that? Did it sound crazy to you?
Yeah, I was kind of in awe about it, but it didn't really affect me, I guess. Because, I mean, I knew even back then, as far as slaves and that, I knew there was a lot of racism. But as far as I remember as a kid even, I had my white friends that I played with, and they came to my house. I went to their house, so it wasn't really a big issue till I started playing competitively.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about the hot stove league that you would play in during the summers. You played from the time you were about 9 years old till you were 15. What was the hot stove league?
The hot stove was a travel league. We held tryouts as well. And it wasn't like they do nowadays. It's like my nephew plays travel basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing all these fundraisers.
Uh-huh.
I guess we did do fundraisers, and we sold candy bars at that time.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like who sold the most or anything like that. And I don't even know where the money went.
Uh-huh.
But it was turned in, and what they did with it, they did with it. But,
and how far were you guys traveling for games? I mean, were you going out of state, or was it just to have enough gas money or like money to pay for uniforms and registration fees? Like, what was the travel component like in your travel baseball experience back then?
yeah, basically we traveled, being that I lived in Oberlin at the time, rarely did we go into Cuyahoga County. It was mainly Lorain County, Erie County, Summit County. You know, we just played teams around there, and we had a schedule, and we probably played 30, 40 games during the summer.
Wow. So after the hot stove league, you could either play American Legion ball, you could play softball, or you would just be done playing. You went to Oberlin High School and played center field for the Indians. You wore number 28 just like Veda Pinson during your one season playing high school ball. In the last game of your sophomore year against Vermilion, you hit an inside the park home run, but after the game, what happened?
Well, our upperclassmen had purchased beer before the game, so they had probably 14 quarts of beer in their gym bags, and they took up a collection before the game, and so they went and bought all this beer. And then at the end of the game, they cracked open the beer, and the fumes just rushed to the front of the bus because it was warm.
Mm-hmm.
And our coach stopped the bus driver and had him pull over. And then he wanted to find out who had the beer or where's the beer, and he wanted to confiscate all the beer. So he did take all the beer except for like 4 quarts. And those guys they drank it afterwards, but I never got to drink any of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I put my little 2 cents in for the beer.
Mm-hmm. That story got out to the papers, and everyone was kicked off the team?
Yes, and suspended.
The entire team was then just kicked out of the conference altogether.
Yes,
From there, you started playing American Legion ball in Norwalk, Ohio.
yes.
How did you know that there was a team that you could play for out there? And how did you get back and forth for practices and games since Norwalk was 30 minutes west of Oberlin?
Yeah, well, I went and tried out for Elyria American Legion, and I would have made that team, but because it's all based on head count from your schools, that point in time, they had Elyria High School, Elyria West High School, Elyria Catholic High School. They could field a team from those 3 schools. They could have 4 or 5 guys from one school, and it only counts as one school.
Mm-hmm.
Where if they were to take me, then I'm going to count for the whole school student body for the Elyria Legion team.
Gotcha.
So one person adds to the whole head count.
Right.
You know, so they had told me that if you wanted to, you could go to like another town and try out for their Legion team.
Uh-huh.
He had mentioned Norwalk, so I went out to Norwalk and tried out for their team and made the team. And the first year I played for them, and then the next year I came back and brought one of my buddies with me, and he made the team as well. And then when I left, he stayed another year, and he brought another buddy in. And so all of a sudden, it's kids coming from Oberlin who were going out to play Norwalk.
Uh-huh.
But I had my license at the age of 16, so I was able to drive
Cool.
to practice. I had my own car.
Cool. American Legion ball used to be huge all over the country, but it's something that the younger generations don't really know anything about. Can you explain kind of what American Legion was and what the skill level was compared to high school or college or minor league teams?
American Legion baseball, it was just like high school caliber ball players. You basically played anywhere from 15 to 18 years old. So, yeah, it was just mainly high school ball players.
Mm-hmm.
When I played for Norwalk, I played with guys that played at Edison, guys that played at Norwalk, some guys that played at Sandusky Perkins.
Mm-hmm. And there were scouts that would come out and watch those American Legion games, right?
Yes.
You mentioned that Scott Fletcher played in Wadsworth and eventually played for the White Sox after being scouted from American Legion ball. So you got some letters from the Major League Scouting Bureau that there were tryouts all over the country. Did those letters serve as invitations to every team's tryouts, or were they just informing you of open tryouts, but then you still had to be personally invited to those specific team tryouts? Like, how did that work?
Well, you had the invitation to go. It's just a matter of getting there. I only went out to Talmadge once for a tryout. You know, it was like several Major League scouts were there.
Mm-hmm.
One that came to mind was Gene Bennett. He was from the Cincinnati Reds.
Cool.
You know, I went to that one. They said that they would just keep in touch, kind of watch you
Mm-hmm.
from time to time if you're going to go play high school baseball or college ball or what have you. So, yeah, they got your name, your number, your address, where you live, and they would just try to keep an eye out for you.
Mm-hmm. So you weren't trying out for the team. It was really a way for them to just kind of gather information about who the local players were. And I'm sure if they saw somebody who was head and shoulders better than everybody else, they'd be like, okay, we need to keep our eye really on this guy. But everybody else, they're kind of just gathering information that we'll keep an eye out for your stats over the next couple of years and see how you're doing.
Yeah, but they did handpick guys at the end of the tryout. So we actually played a ball game right after the tryout. So basically what they did was they called your name out and you go over here, and then it would be like, okay, well, you guys, sorry, we'll keep an eye out for you, but you didn't make it.
Yeah.
These guys over here, we put you over here because we want to get a closer look at you,
Yeah.
and we're going to scrimmage. So they had guys that were pitchers, and they put you in certain positions, and we played a 7-inning ball game.
Cool. In 1976, you earned an invitation to the Florida Instructional League in Fort Lauderdale with the New York Yankees. You got on a plane on January 23rd, 1976, after finishing your high school credits that December, a semester early, and you landed a couple hours later wearing shorts in Fort Lauderdale. What were some of the emotions that you were going through before, during, and after that flight?
Well, first time I've ever flown on a plane.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I cried. And even back then, they let my dad come onto the plane to make sure I was okay, because I cried before I even got on the plane. When I was leaving my family, I cried. And then I got on the plane, and I'm still, like, kind of crying, looking out the window. Next thing you know, my dad taps me on the shoulder. And he's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine," you know. And I'm like, "What are you doing on the plane?" You know. And he said, "They let me come on just to make sure that you're okay." So I'm like, "Yeah, get out of here." So he left, and 2.5 hours later, I'm in Fort Lauderdale.
Mm-hmm.
It was amazing.
Tell me about Charlie Rhodes and the house that you stayed at down in Florida.
Yeah, we stayed in a kind of a ranch house, 4 bedrooms, and we had like 7 guys that were living in the house.
Mm-hmm.
When I came, I was actually the 7th person. So we just shared rooms. There wasn't really any beds. So we slept on the floor. We either slept in our sleeping bag, or a couple guys went and grabbed TVs from pawn shops or whatever, and just so we'd have a TV. But yeah, basically there was no curtains in the house. We slept on the floor, and yeah, it was kind of weird, especially being, I'm just meeting these guys for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was kind of odd.
And you had been invited to come down, so you'd think like, oh, they must be taking care of us. And then that's what you show up to. It's like, oh, this is not probably what you had in mind.
No, it wasn't. I was just kind of floored that, wow, we're staying in this house. We didn't have to pay rent, but we're staying in this house. We were told that you got to be at the ballpark at like 8 o'clock in the morning. So how you got there, that was on you.
How far away from the ballpark was your...
Yeah, it was probably 3 or 4 miles. So we either hitchhiked, or we walked, or we ran, or somebody gave us a ride. Because we did have one guy, Steve Hughes, he played pro ball. He had a conversion van, because he had already signed with Cincinnati. He got signed first by Pittsburgh Pirates. So he played for the Charleston Charlies with Willie Randolph. They were kind of the shortstop, second baseman combination. And then he ended up going to Cincinnati and was with the Cincinnati Reds organization. They sent him to the instructional league to work on his hitting because he couldn't hit very well. He was really a polished infielder, but he just didn't hit very well.
All glove, no hit?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but he had the van, and he loaded us up, and we'd make it to the ballpark and so on.
You said before that Charlie Rhodes kind of exploited ball players. How do you mean?
Well, he had connections with Ed Charles, who played for the Mets, and he knew a few guys that had, some of the organizations down to spring training. Like he had connections with the Yankees, he had connections with Pittsburgh, he had connections with the Orioles.
So did he kind of hang that over your guys' heads?
He actually played some pro ball. I don't know much about what he did and that. All I know is he owned the house we lived in, and he made sure that we were up and at the ballpark when we're supposed to be.
So you're what, 17, 18 years old at this time?
Yeah, I was 18.
So obviously you don't have to go to school anymore. So what was your day-to-day schedule down in Florida? You got to be at the ballpark at 8 o'clock. What time would baseball end during the day? And then what would you do after until the next day?
Yeah, we would be at the ballpark at 8. We took batting practice, fielding practice. When the actual major league ball players got there, we just basically shagged balls and stuff for them. Right around the noon hour, we went back home for 3-4 hours, only to be back at the ballpark by 6-7 o'clock, so we'd play an evening ball game. So we'd play at night, and then after that, we had to find our way back home, But
and
yeah.
You guys weren't being paid, right?
No.
So how did you pay for meals? And if you needed to pay for gas, how did that happen?
It's whatever your parents or how much money you had when you left home. Yeah.
So how many ball players do you think never made it to the show because they couldn't afford to stay for 8 weeks, paying their own way and doing stuff like that?
Yeah, there was a few of them that ended up leaving. We had a couple of guys in our house that actually stole cars from a Cadillac dealer. And one was from Ypsilanti, Michigan. The other one was from Akron. And those two got together, and they went and broke into a Cadillac dealership and stole cars and came in and dropped a bag of keys in front of me and says, "Hey, man, pick one out," And I'm like, "What are you, crazy?" So, yeah, they left the whole bag of keys with me. I didn't know what to do with them. I was scared because the cops came and they were shining lights in our windows. And, we just stayed on the floor because, we knew these guys stole these cars. They just came back, got their stuff, threw it in the car, and they were heading back up north. And they didn't have much money on them.
Yeah.
But they left a bag of keys with me. And I'm like, what do I do with these keys? And the cops were, like I said, they were shining lights through our windows. They never came to our door or anything. But we were all scared. And the next day, I took those keys and I put them in my bag on the way to the ballpark. I dropped them in the Atlantic Ocean. Yeah.
So all those Cadillacs just are sitting still probably where they were because nobody had the keys to start them and move them.
They had to get a locksmith to get them keys, I guess.
That's wild.
That was pretty wild.
My next question was going to be, was it hard to stay disciplined being away from home for the first time? But it kind of sounds like you just answered that question.
Yeah, I never really got in trouble any times, but I knew I came down here for a reason.
Yeah.
So that was my ticket to either play baseball or I'm coming back home.
And did you guys have a curfew, or were they just like, you do whatever you want, but you need to be at the field at 8. So whatever you need to do to make that happen, go for it.
Yes. And if you needed to get a job because you didn't have money,
yeah,
and we all did that, we all applied at McDonald's. And back then in Fort Lauderdale, it was considered like the world's largest McDonald's. So we all worked there, so, you can eat.
Yeah, that
They
helps.
take it out of your paycheck. But, yeah, you could eat. I only worked there for 3 days. I quit. I couldn't handle it, We had to work around our baseball schedule. So basically, we worked nights because they were 24 hours.
Oh, cool, okay.
So, yeah, we worked at night. And however we got a ride home, somebody would give us a ride home. Sometimes you had to walk home. And McDonald's was probably easily 1.5 miles, 2 miles away. So, yeah, 3 days, and that was enough for me.
Yeah. I mean, just the baseball schedule alone seems kind of grueling. Every single day, 8 a.m. to noon, and then 6 o'clock till the game's over. Like you're playing a doubleheader essentially every single day for 8 weeks. To have enough energy to work on top of that, I couldn't do it.
Or to go out on the town afterwards.
Yeah.
You come home and get changed, and we start hitchhiking down to the down to the strip, down to the beach.
During that instructional league experience, you shared the field with Reggie Jackson, Mickey Rivers, and Greg Nettles, shagging fly balls and, like you said, fielding grounders while they took batting practice. And then at the end of the practice, you and the other instructional league players got to hit, and the scouts and coaches would tell you guys what your flaws were. So what were some of the flaws that they told you about?
Basically, they're just telling me that you got good skills, you got good speed, your arm could be better.
Mm-hmm.
But mainly, it was just don't pull off on the ball, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I mean, I was able to hit a curveball and a fastball even. I mean, my thing was I could bunt. So
Yeah.
I was a good bunter.
At that time, were players lifting weights and working out, or was that something that people hadn't really thought to do yet?
Well, I think still today, baseball players are the worst conditioned athletes there are.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we didn't lift weights or anything. If anything I did was I ran.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, weightlifting, that type of thing, no.
So when they were telling you, like, you need to get your arm stronger, how did you plan to do that? What were you going to do?
Well, that's just it. We didn't really go into the training facility to see weight rooms and that.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, when we got there, we were in the locker room, got changed, or you showed up with your uniform on anyways.
Uh-huh.
But that was pretty much it. We didn't get to go into the cafeteria, didn't go in the weight room, So it was just basically we're on the field or we were in the locker room, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah. You were a leadoff hitter who played center field, but what kind of player were you? Because I've heard you described as Kenny Lofton before Kenny Lofton.
Yes. Yeah, I always led off. I was always a leadoff hitter.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, bunter, slap hitter, I got on base, I stole bases.
Your nickname was Dr. Deuce. Tell me how you got that nickname. What does that mean?
One, I wore the number 2 on my uniforms a lot over the years. But mainly, if I got walked, then it was like, hey, you're walking a double.
Mm-hmm.
I get walked, I'm going to steal second, I'm probably going to steal third. There's times I might even steal home. But yeah, that's kind of how we got it, is walking a double.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, one of my friends was like, first they were calling me Dr. J. But I said, there's only one Dr. J, and he's in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So I said, well, I'll be Dr. Deuce. So that's kind of how it was.
That's cool. Like you said, you were a great bunter, which was one of the things that helped you have a high batting average. In a July 1978 issue of the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, it was reported that you were batting over 400 after 20 games in the season. We don't know what your true career statistics are or what they were for individual seasons. Those aren't really publicly available or haven't been compiled anywhere yet. But do you know what your statistics were? Like, did you keep your own stats in a notebook or a binder or something like that?
I did. Where it is today, I don't know. I had a calendar. So every time we had a game, I would put down on the calendar of that day what I did. If I went 1 for 2, 0 for 3, whatever, I put it in the calendar. And I don't know where that calendar is.
At the end of the season, would you compile like your season batting average, or were those statistics things that you kept, or was it just your individual daily stats?
Yeah, I mean, those I kept. I mean, when I played American Legion baseball, they kept your statistics.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as when I went down to instructional league and then planned for the Clowns and that, I just kept them myself.
Yeah, that's cool.
The
The most bases you ever stole in a game was 6, but you weren't just a volume stealer, you were efficient. You said in 4 years of college ball, you were only thrown out 3 times trying to steal. What made you such a great base stealer? Was it just the fact that you were so fast?
No, I think it's just that I'd get a good lead. There's a technique that I think I developed it myself more so than a coach saying, hey, do this. I positioned my feet like east and west. So when I took off, I didn't drop my foot back and take off. I just turn and go. So I think it's mainly just getting the jump on the pitch.
When you were on first base, what would you be looking at from a pitcher to know whether or not you could go or when to go?
His foot. Yeah, basically the heel of his foot.
The heel of his rubber foot?
Yes.
Yeah. You've also said that you weren't just stealing on the pitcher, you were also sometimes stealing on the catcher. What would you look at from a catcher to know whether or not you could take the next base?
If he was lazy. If he threw the ball back to the pitcher from his knees, I'm going to steal. Because sometimes you had catchers that would, after every pitch, stand up and throw back to the pitcher, but then they get lazy because they want to keep getting up and down, up and down, up and down, so they just throw back on their knees. And when they did that, first time I ever had that happen, my coach jumped on me because I stole the base when the catcher was throwing the ball back to the pitcher. And he chewed me out. I didn't tell you when to steal. I know. I stole on my own.
Yeah, was I safe or not?
Yeah, I was safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so after that, I just kind of developed that,
Uh-huh.
you know. I would just steal. It's like the delayed steal.
Yeah.
So if he's going to throw the ball back to the pitcher off his knees, I'm gone.
Yeah. What about when you were actually on second base then? How was stealing third base different from stealing second base?
Oh, it was a heck of a lot easier. You get a bigger lead. So I'm gonna go as far as my shortstop.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's playing deep back in the hole, I'm going out as far as he is. And just with my peripheral vision, if I see him start moving towards second, I'll take a step back.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I mean, there's times where the pitcher would wheel around and throw. I'm going to third.
Uh-huh.
You know?
Because you're already halfway
I'm
there to
already
begin
halfway,
with.
yeah.
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 Would you play with the angles? Like, you might be 15 feet away from the base, but if you're standing closer to the pitcher, those 15 feet seem shorter. And if you're standing further away, they seem like, did you play with those type of things?
Quite a bit, especially when I was on first base.
Yeah.
I would take my lead and I would move towards the pitcher, but yet I'm still moving away from the bag.
Mm-hmm.
But see, when he looks down and looks back, try to see me, he can still see me. But if I was back behind the first base bag and then leading off, then he can't see me, and he doesn't know how far I'm off the bag,
Mm-hmm.
and he'd tend to throw over there.
Right.
That was how I'd get a better jump on the pitcher that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've heard some rumors that you had a pretty incredible afro during those days. Can you confirm or deny those?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
the biggest afro. I can show it to you when we're done.
When you were down in Fort Lauderdale, one of the guys you roomed with, you said earlier, his name was Steve Hughes. He'd been signed with the Pirates. How was his lifestyle different from yours at that point, with him being someone who had already been signed compared to someone who was hoping to be signed? Was it just the fact that he had a little bit extra money in his pocket?
Exactly, he had a paycheck because he was still getting paid, you know, and they sent him down to an instructional league.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But was he sleeping on the floor just like you guys? Or
absolutely,
Interesting.
unless he wanted to sleep in his van. His van
yeah,
was
that's
probably,
true.
It had a conversion van, so it was pretty decked out
Uh-huh.
back in the day.
Yeah, and the van probably had curtains and your room didn't.
Curtains and everything, yeah.
You said that Steve helped you get down to Miami to go to camp with the Baltimore Orioles, and you later broke into camp with the Orioles where you got to share the field with Eddie Murray. Eddie's rookie season wasn't till 1977, so he wasn't quite Eddie Murray yet, you know, member of a 500 home run club or member of 3,000 hit club or anything like that. But could you already see that there was something special about him at that point?
No, I mean, I didn't think there was anything special about him other than that, you know, you just got to be at the right place at the right time. And those guys were signed. And I mean, I didn't think they were any better than I was. But I was in awe of Reggie Jackson and Eddie Murray and Mickey Rivers. You know, even one thing I failed to mention is Paul Blair. He played the shallowest center field than anybody I know. I'm not that type of center fielder. I got to play deep because I can come in on the ball better. I wasn't real good at going back on the ball because the ball jumped. I played a deeper center field because I can come in on it. But he played so shallow that he goes back on the ball very well. I was amazed at that guy, Paul Blair.
That's cool. So the major league teams broke camp after about 8 weeks, but you stayed down in Florida for another couple weeks before returning back to Ohio on April 23rd, 1976. You had a tryout with the Indians in 1976 as well, so you were kind of getting some decent opportunities. Who was Curtis Wallace?
Curtis Wallace played for the Indianapolis Clowns. He had signed by the Chicago White Sox. He was down in the instructional league, and he was an infielder, really stocky, built guy, was strong, could hit for some power. And he was looking at A-ball at that time, playing A-ball. But he had mentioned the fact that if he didn't make the club, then he was going to go and play for the Clowns. He said, I'm going to go play for the Clowns again. So it was like, what do you mean play for them again? You know, who are they? And he told me about the Clowns and, you know, mentioned Hank Aaron, Satchel Paige. So yeah, that was like the first time I even knew that Hank Aaron was basically segregated from playing with white ball players and that as well. But yeah, he mentioned play with Indianapolis Clowns. They're like the Globetrotters of baseball. And he goes, yeah, we play good ball. We travel all over the place, you know. And I'm like, really? He goes, yeah. He goes, all you got to do is make the team and travel.
So did he help you set up a tryout, or he just made you aware that they existed? And like, how did you get invited to a tryout then after that?
Well, I'm assuming it had to be from one of the scouts because basically, I mean, I give the credit to the Baltimore Orioles organization for giving me the opportunity to go to college. Even though the Yankees invited me down for spring training for the instructional league, when I went down to Miami and tried out with the Orioles, they seemed a lot more interested than the Yankees. Yankees just figured, there's a couple kids out here. But yeah, I was really impressed with the Baltimore Orioles. So I would think that they're the ones, either that or Curtis told somebody about me playing, and that's how I got invited to Muscatine, Iowa to try out for the Clowns.
Yeah, for 25 years, George Long was the booking agent for the Indianapolis Clowns. He bought the team in 1972 from Ed Hammond, who had actually been a player on the Clowns until he bought the team from Sid Pollock. Hammond was known in his playing days for being able to pitch the ball from behind his back or between his legs. George Long, though, would operate the Clowns from 1972 to 1983, so he was the team owner at the time when you were going to try out to make the team. Since George lived in Muscatine, Iowa, that's where the tryouts were held. You were invited to try out in 1977. How did you get there?
My brother and my sister drove me out to Muscatine, Iowa.
Mm-hmm. And it was just a one-day tryout,
One
right?
day.
So did they stay there and wait for the tryout to be done and then drive you back home, or how did that?
Yeah, kind of. They went and did something, but yeah, once I let them know that I made the team, then they left to come back to Ohio.
Uh-huh.
But they wasn't actually there watching me try out.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember what they did at that time, but all I know is like 3 hours later, they came back because we didn't have cell phones or anything.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, I made the team. Let me get my suitcase and bye.
Cool.
Then they just put me up in the Hotel Muscatine, and that's where we stayed.
When Curtis Wallace arrived with the Clowns after he was called to come play for the team, he was surprised by what he saw. He said, quote, I figured I'd walk into a hotel and there'd be a bunch of guys in the lobby bobbing their heads and sticking their tongues out with their eyes rolling in big circles. People walking on their hands and juggling balls and bouncing them on their heads. The Indianapolis Clowns. And I was kind of scared because I figured somebody was going to ask me about my number if I kicked balls off my feet or did cartwheels or what. But all I could do was play baseball. Did you kind of know what to expect when you showed up with the team? Did anyone give you the heads up that just because they're called the Clowns, it was still actually real baseball? It wasn't just goofing around?
No, I pretty much thought it was just real baseball. And then it's like, well, they're the Globetrotters of baseball.
Mm-hmm.
So, I knew there was going to be a clown prince or whatever. But as far as myself even being in the act or clowning, I didn't think anything about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just happened.
And what about the fans? Do you think the fans showed up to games thinking it was going to be more of a funny show or performance and not real legitimate baseball? Like, yeah, you guys had your routines, but you were still playing real ball, right?
Yes, we played real ball. And sometimes it was less than 9 guys on the field because we had Birmingham Sam or Bobo. They were our clown prince at the time. So it was a matter of they're coming out back on the field or they're up in the stands messing around with people. And they played real ball too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was after the first day or first game, then I realized that, wow, this is kind of a vaudeville type scene, clowning. I didn't know if they were real serious or not, but I knew I was serious about playing ball.
Yeah.
I had heard that Hank Aaron got his start from the Clowns, so I'm like, well, if he did it, I can make it too.
Yeah.
So
roster sizes for Negro League teams were usually only about 15 or 16 players per team, but the Clowns were only keeping about 14 players on their rosters when you were with the team, which meant that tryouts were pretty competitive because there were only a couple spots that weren't already accounted for. Did all 14 guys travel with the team at all times?
Well, we had 12.
12.
Yeah.
Why was 12 the number that the team decided on?
That's how many seats there were in the checker arrow. There's just room for 12 guys.
Yeah. The team was traveling in a checker arrow limo, which sounds luxurious when you say it that way, but it was also known as an arrow bus. There were 4 rows of bench seats and then a trunk area, so it could seat 12 people, but there was only room for 12, and that seating configuration meant that 4 people were always sitting in middle seats. Did you guys have assigned seating while traveling according to some hierarchy, or would you rotate seats so 4 guys weren't stuck sitting in the middle all season long?
Yeah, we just, whoever got in the seat first. If you got in there and you're sitting by the window first, then that's your seat. Yeah.
Okay, but if there's room for 12 people in the car and you're bringing 12 players, that means that you didn't have a driver.
He was a player.
Yeah. So was one player always the driver, or did you guys rotate that?
We rotated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there kind of an unwritten team rule that at least one player on the roster at all times had to be good with cars in case your car broke down?
No, but I don't think any of us really were any type of mechanic.
What would happen? Because I'm sure, you're playing all these games, traveling all over the country. There must have been a time where something happened.
Sure. Oh, yeah. We knew how to change a tire or check the oil on the car or something like that. But as far as mechanically inclined, I don't think any of us were. We didn't really have a bunch of tools anyways. If we had a flat tire, and if we had a spare tire and stuff to change it with, then we changed the tire. Otherwise, we'd stop somebody, flag them down on the road and see if they'd give us a jump or change a tire. Or
there was an instance one time where you guys were driving just outside Muscatine and the rear wheel came off the bus.
Yeah.
Tell me about
it's
that.
in a ball of fire. Yeah. All I know is that as we're coming to a stop, all of a sudden, there goes this flame, flew by us, ball of fire into the weeds out in the field. It was our tire. Our rear tire was on fire. So we jumped out of the car, and the axle's sitting there burning, and we were like ready to thinking that this thing's going to blow up.
Yeah.
So we ran out into the field just waiting for that car to blow up. Of course, it didn't, and it actually put itself out. The axle was burning, but it actually extinguished itself. Well, that was another fiasco. Yeah.
And then you guys all had to get back in that same car when it was fixed and take it to the next trip.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure that was a real...
Yeah, it broke down a few times. But mainly it was either something like a dead battery, alternator, flat tire.
Did you guys have a manager?
We had George Long. He only traveled with us for like 2 weeks out of the whole season. Other than that, we did it ourselves.
So what happened then? Did you guys have to squish 4 players into one of the rows of seats, or did someone lay down in the trunk with the equipment, or would George be traveling in his own vehicle? Like, when he was traveling with the team, did that screw up everything that was going on?
No, he was a pretty frail guy anyway, so he didn't take up much room. We'd squeeze him in. So it was maybe 13 of us in the vehicle at the time. But nobody wanted to sit by George.
No?
No.
Why not?
He only had a change of clothes, one change of clothes with him. So, he's just like an old man. He smelled like an old man. Eat his apples.
Yeah, it's green apples, right?
Yeah.
How did you guys deal with injuries? Did you have a team trainer or anyone who knew about health and medicine or anything like that? Like, if somebody got hurt or sick, what happened?
You're sick. You got hurt. I broke my wrist.
Twice, right?
Yeah, twice within 6 weeks.
What happened both of those times? How did you break it?
I broke it once. I was playing ball in Oberlin at the time. And I dove for a ball, broke my wrist. And then within 6 weeks' time, it was time for baseball. And then I broke my wrist again, breaking up a double play. But then when I was with the Clowns, I broke my wrist again.
And which wrist was it? Your throwing hand or your glove hand?
Yeah, my throwing hand.
Dang.
Yeah. I broke that by breaking up a double play. So I had both of my hands broken before. But breaking up a double play when I was with the Clowns, I slid, broke it, and the guy jumped up when I took him out on the double play, and he landed on my arm. There was 2 weeks left in the season, so instead of just sending me home, I went up into the booth and started announcing, because I know what's going to happen. So it was all kind of part of the plan. I'd get out there on the microphone and start talking. Hey, there goes Birmingham Sam out there. Hey, get out. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. But
what happened if there was ever like a serious injury? Like if somebody broke their leg or their arm, would they get sent home or what would happen? Yeah,
you'd get sent home. Who would go to the hospital? Once you got out of the hospital, you go home.
Who would take their place then? Like, did you guys have reserves, or would you have to have an emergency tryout or something? Like, what would happen?
We would just try to pick somebody up on the road. Like if we played against a team and they had a couple guys on the bench, we'd have them come play for us.
Gotcha. How many games would you play in a season? Like, how long were the seasons in terms of calendar months as well?
They were like 3 months. But we'd play 60, 70 ball games. We'd play 2, sometimes 3 times in a day.
Yeah. There were really only 3 guys on the Clowns who pitched, but anyone on the team who could throw strikes could pitch to save those guys' arms since the team played so many games. Would you all kind of just talk to each other on the bus on the way to the next game, and one of your pitchers would be like, hey man, my arm's kind of tired today, I need someone to eat some innings? Or how would you all decide who was going to throw game by game if you didn't have a manager like setting a pitching rotation or something like that?
No, we just figured out how you feel. Hey, is your arm all right today? Yeah, I feel good. Okay. So you pitched. I never pitched. I mean, I could pitch. I just didn't want to pitch. But yeah, we had other guys that could throw a strike or whatever.
You traveled to 28 different states in 3 months while you were with the Clowns 1 year. Who was the person scheduling all of the games and then coordinating the travel schedule? Was that George Long?
George Long. Once we broke camp, yeah, he had the schedule all made up, where we're going and who we play.
So your entire season was set from day one? Great. So what was the travel schedule like for a barnstorming team back then? Because I know sometimes, like you said, you'd play one game in the morning and then another game in the afternoon and then another game at night, or sometimes there'd be a game in the morning and then you'd travel to a different location that could be 200 miles away and play another game that same night. So what, throughout the course of a week, were you playing games every single day, or would you play 2 games this day, 3 games the next day, and then you kind of have 4 or 5 days off? Like, how did it work?
We never had days off. Only time we had days off is if we got rained out. Even like traveling from city to city or whatever, we just slept in the car. We didn't stay in any town over 24 hours but one time. We stayed in Sioux Falls, South Dakota overnight one night. Basically, we were there for several days. But that's the only time because it rained for a week and we didn't play. So we were in Sioux Falls for like 3 days. And George Long said, hey, I'm going to have to send you guys some money to come home because I can't afford to feed you guys and I can't afford to gas the car or take care of the car, maintenance, and we're not making any money. But yeah, then we'd have teams that wanted us to come back after they were rained out and we couldn't bobtail back. We had a schedule.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
You kind of joke about how often George would bring up money or how he would always say things like he couldn't afford to pay you guys to be on the road if things weren't going well. Do you think the margins were really that thin for him, or did he just use that kind of as a motivational tool to get players to always try their hardest and put on a good show, or maybe even as a manipulation tactic so you guys would never come in asking for more money, that you just feel grateful for getting the money that you were getting on a day-to-day basis from him?
No, I think basically, because George, he didn't have any feelings for anybody. Like he'd say, if you can't hit, I can't afford to feed you. I'll send you home. And I've seen him send guys home. We were clear out in Utah once, and our shortstop wasn't hitting, and sent him home.
I could understand that if you're trying to win a pennant, but you guys weren't quite doing that. Like, if somebody wasn't hitting well, but they were still putting on a great show, wasn't that value to him?
Well, not everybody was a clown.
Gotcha.
You know, I was in the act, but we had the guys that did shadow ball. So, yeah, all of our guys, we'd all participate in shadow ball. But the rowboat act and some of the other acts that we did was just basically the Clown Prince and then myself. I was roommate with Birmingham Sam. So we roomed together when we did get a hotel or a motel. So, yeah, I was in the act. I could juggle and stuff like that. So.
You played in North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, Kentucky, Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri, Nebraska, Kansas, Utah, Idaho, Montana, New Mexico, Colorado. All these different states. With all that time spent on the bus, this was before cell phones, before anyone had the internet in their pockets. What would you guys do to pass the time riding around from state to state? I mean, you guys must have been in the car for 12 hours at a time sometimes, right? Yeah. What would you do?
Well, we drank some beers, smoked some cigarettes, drank some beers. But yeah, mainly we had one guy that pretty much did the driving. And then occasionally we would take over for him because a lot of times he didn't want to give up the wheel. But he would when he was really tired. Coco. He was our second baseman. But yeah, to pass the time, we just had the AM radio. There was an AM radio in the car. And basically we just busted each other's balls, kind of ball busting.
Would you guys play poker? Would you read?
No, just whatever, if you fall asleep. Other than that, that's basically it. I mean, you either just rode along or you fell asleep, or we didn't play cards or anything in the car. There's no room for that. So yeah, it was just basically kind of ball busting each other. And that's how we kept ourselves entertained. If you had to stop and take a pee break or whatever, and just on the side of the road, guys would hop out, take a leak, and we'd pull off like we were leaving them. And so we did that. We did that quite a bit.
Yeah, all the classic road trip gags, right?
Yeah.
This was obviously before GPS or anything like that. Did you guys ever have any difficulties navigating from one city to another, whether it was due to construction you didn't know about or maps with outdated roads which didn't exist anymore? Like, did you ever have trouble just getting around?
There's times where if we couldn't find a place, and we had a phone number to the coach of the team was where we're headed.
Gotcha.
We had a phone number for them. So if it was something like we got lost or whatever, we'd call them and say, hey, we're in Egypt. But other than that, call back to George Long. But yeah, we always had a map of all 50 states. We got to read the maps quite a bit.
How did you keep in touch with people when you were on the road? Like, were you writing letters? Were you just making payphone calls when you get to your destination? Or were you just kind of incommunicado for 3 months and then you just catch up with people when you got back home when the season was over?
Yeah, our mail would go to Muscatine, and then he would Western Union the letters or whatever we got. Oh, cool, okay. He would send them to the next town. So then we just go to the post office and pick them up. But that's mainly how we got our mail that way. As far as communicating, yeah, you stop and make a phone call off the payphone or collect call. So yeah, we did that quite a bit. But yeah, it was just mainly, like I said, you'd have girls would send you letters. So that would go to Muscatine. We'd just tell them send it to Muscatine, and then they would send it to the next town wherever we're going to be.
Cool. You guys were called the Indianapolis Clowns, but you weren't really based out of Indianapolis. Was Muscatine the city you guys considered home? Even though you didn't really have a home ballpark, you didn't play games in Muscatine more than any other place. But is that where you guys considered home base for you guys?
That was our home base, yeah. Because that's where George Long lived in Muscatine.
Uh-huh.
Plus, he also had a town team. He had the Muscatine Red Sox.
Right.
So first game of the season, we played them. And then after that, we left and we never came back to Muscatine until basically end of the season.
Uh-huh.
As long as you made it through the whole season, come back to Muscatine, and then you go home,
Uh-huh.
you know,
Was there one place you didn't get to play while you were with the Clowns that you really wanted to play?
at home.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was the only guy that didn't play in his home state. The 2 years that I played for him, everybody played in their home state except for myself. So I got to play in Kentucky, Illinois, Indiana, West Virginia, but never did I make it to Ohio.
Yeah, that's a shame. You played for the Clowns in 1977 and 1978, and we brought his name up earlier and have talked about him many times, but at the time, George Long was the owner of the team. He was the longtime organizer and coach of the semi-pro team in Muscatine, Iowa, like you said, the Red Sox. And when I say long time, I mean that. He spent 67 years with the team. He managed Babe Ruth and Henry Aaron and managed against Satchel Paige and Dizzy Dean. In an interview with the New York Daily News when he was 89 years old, he was asked how long he would manage, and he said, "I'm going to give it up when I get old."
Yeah.
He managed into his 90s, finishing with a record more than 600 games over 500. What can you tell us about him in the way that he ran the club and how he promoted and how he made a barnstorming team in the late 1970s a viable thing?
Yeah, like I said, he'd have a stack of those posters or whatever.
Yeah, broadsides, they're known as sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, he would basically carry a stack of those, and he'd go around and put them in different bar windows and restaurant windows and tack them onto the trees, telephone poles, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
But he would walk. As soon as we'd get to town, he would leave, and he would just walk. Well, no one ever knew where he was at. And then there's times we'd be driving and we'd pass him. You know, when he didn't want to ride.
Uh-huh.
You know, sometimes we'd stop and say, "Hey, you need a ride?" And he'd, no, see you back at the hotel. You know,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, he just walked. Kept him in shape.
Yeah. The Indianapolis Clowns had won the league championship in 1950, 1951, 1952, and 1954. During those years, it acquired star players Hubert Big Daddy Wooten, DeWitt Woody Smallwood, and Reese Goose Tatum, as well as future Major League players John Wyatt, Clarence Choo Choo Coleman, Paul Casanova, and Hal King. The Clowns were also the first professional baseball team to hire a woman to a long-term contract to play competitively when Tony Stone played second base for the Clowns in 1953 and hit .243. Two other women, Mamie Peanut Johnson and Connie Morgan, would also play for the Clowns, serving as the only three women to play in the Negro Leagues. But by far, the most famous player to ever put on a Clowns uniform was Henry Aaron. The future home run king signed his first professional contract with the Clowns in 1953, getting $200 a month. And while he wasn't quite Hammered Hank yet, he batted cleanup and played shortstop in Indianapolis until the Clowns sold his contract to the Boston Braves. When you were with the Clowns, you said that you knew that Henry Aaron had played for the team, but were you aware of the long history that the team had, or was this kind of just like any other team except they were the ones that gave you the chance to play?
Yeah, when I played with them, like I said, I had heard about him when I was in spring training, but I didn't know exactly what to expect. And then when I found out that Hank Aaron played for him, then it really gave me the sense of, man, this is a serious venture. If he played there and got signed there, then this is not just a little thing that you're just going to go out and play and lollygag and have. I've always taken the game pretty serious anyways, because I'm a fanatic when it comes to baseball, basketball, football. I was always pretty serious about playing the game.
If you wanted to learn about the history of the team back then, how would you have been able to do it?
Just word of mouth.
Yeah. So would George Long ever say, like, you know, back in the 1940s, like, would he spin those yarns?
Oh, yeah, he would do that. He had a lot of good stories, but I rarely did we talk to George Long very much. Mainly, I would get a lot of the stuff from, like, Birmingham Sam or Bobo. Those guys have played for him several years.
Yeah.
That's where I would kind of get my history from.
The Indianapolis Clowns were historically a Negro League team, but the Negro American League's 1951 season is generally considered the last true Negro League season. Most Negro League teams disbanded for good when the Negro American League officially closed its doors in 1952, 3 years after it had become the sole Negro Major League still in operation. But the Clowns kept playing until the 1980s. Even though the Negro Leagues as we know them were no longer operating when you were playing for the Clowns, Did you guys consider yourself Negro League players, or were you Barnstormers just simply carrying the torch for the legacy of Negro Leaguers? Like, how did you guys think of yourselves back then?
Yeah, I think more of the Barnstormer team. Of course, we had carried the Negro League mantra, so to speak. But, that's mainly what it was. When we would get announced at certain ballparks, we were the Indianapolis Clowns, the last of the Negro League baseball teams.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, we're Barnstormers. That's how I looked at it, as Barnstorm.
And has your opinion on that changed over the past 50 years, or is that still how you think of it?
Yeah, pretty much think of it as Barnstormer.
The 1976 movie The Bingo Long Traveling All-Stars and Motor Kings is loosely based on the story of the Indianapolis Clowns. That movie featured James Earl Jones, Richard Pryor, and Billy D. Williams. You played with the Clowns in 1977 and 78, so while you missed being a part of the filming by about a year and a half, 3 of your Clowns teammates were in the movie. Had you seen that movie before you played with the Clowns?
No. I heard about it because they were in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I heard about it then. And then once I came home after the season, I was able to watch. It was very hard to find. And matter of fact, Kim and I just watched it again the other night.
Same.
So I have that now. And I also have the book.
Cool.
Some are called Clowns book.
Yeah. In order to add authenticity to the baseball scenes of that movie, the cast included Leon Daddy Wags Wagner, who was a 2-time American League All-Star, Joffrey Brown, who pitched in one game for the 1968 Chicago Cubs and then became a well-respected Hollywood stuntman, and Birmingham Sam Bryson. Bryson played shortstop Lewis Keystone in the movie. Did that film play a part in the way that the Clowns advertised their own games once that movie was out? Like, did you guys wear brightly colored uniforms like in the movie, or kind of played up like, hey, we're the team that they're talking about in this famous movie?
Yeah. Well, Birmingham, he wore kind of a Clowns type outfit.
Mm-hmm.
And Bobo, they both wore different uniforms than what we had.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was just mainly the Indianapolis Clowns based on the movie, from the movie. A lot of it was just like what I experienced.
Yeah. The Clowns, like almost all established Negro League teams, struggled with attendance during the Great Depression. While Sid Pollock's Westchester Blue Sox were one of the first teams to add comedy as an incentive to attract audiences as early as 1922, it became a staple for the Clowns in the following decades as well. A player would often throw under his legs or behind his back, while another read a newspaper at shortstop or at first base. A catcher sat in a rocking chair while still able to throw out runners trying to steal second base. Tell me about the shadow ball routine you guys would do during the third inning of games when you were with the Clowns.
The shadow ball was just taking infield practice with an imaginary ball. It's just like the coach or whoever's going to hit a ground ball to the third baseman, and he's imaginary, picking up, throwing to second baseman's tapping the bag, throwing to first. It was our shadow ball, and then we'd do that in slow motion, and we'd do it to music. So it was fun.
Yeah, that's cool. The first time I went to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in Kansas City, it was the first time I had seen a video of shadow ball happening, and it was just so cool. Like the fact that they thought of it first of all, but then they make it look so real. And I can't imagine what a stadium full of people watching that must have felt. Definitely something that you got to see for yourself.
Yeah.
If a player was included in the shadow ball routine, he got paid a little bit more and also then got a special jersey, right?
Yeah. Not really a special jersey. I mean, I got that jersey because Birmingham Sam carried that one with him. So he gave me that jersey because I was in the act. But other than that, I mean, yeah, you get a little extra money if you're in the act. So yeah, I got $13 a day. That's more than Hank Aaron made.
Yeah.
I think that came out to like $349 a month or something.
Yeah, and Hank was getting $200 a month, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about some of the specific players that you played with on the Indianapolis Clowns. Richard King was the famous clown prince for the Clowns known as King Tut. His illness led to his retirement in the spring of 1959, which left a void with the Indianapolis Clowns. James Nature Boy Williams was popular, but the Barnstormers needed someone with Tut's charisma. They finally found him in 1962. His name was Sam Bryson. Given his resemblance to King Tut, Clowns owner Sid Pollock originally billed Bryson as King Tut Jr., but fans kept asking Sam how his dad was doing, thinking they were asking about the original King Tut, and Sam didn't have an answer for him because that wasn't his dad, and he didn't want to lie to the fans who genuinely cared about how King Tut was and were asking out of kindness how he was doing. So when Pollock asked if he just wanted to be called by his own name, Bryson said, "No, I figure Birmingham Sam will be good. People will ask me how Birmingham is, and I can answer that." He was your roommate. You played with him for a couple years. Tell me some Birmingham Sam stories.
Sam was crazy. No, he was a pretty good athlete, though. He was a really good golfer. So anytime we got into town on a Wednesday, he's going to the golf course and playing against the doctors. So he'd borrow money from me, He always called me Junior. And I said, why you call me Junior? He said, because that Satchel Paige used to call him Junior. So he'd call me Junior, and he'd say, Junior, how much money you have? Well, I got $20, $30 or whatever. And he said, let me borrow it. I'll double it. I'll triple it when I get back. I'm like, you better, man, because this is all I have, you know. So, yeah, he would go out and hustle the doctors on the golf courses. And he would come back with a couple $100. And to carry a couple $100 for us, your mother must have sent you some money.
Yeah.
Because how are you going to get $100, you know? I got $13 a day, and I couldn't even spend it because we were busy playing.
Right.
When we're done playing, I mean, we'd go to a local bar or whatever, and they would feed us.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd drink and eat for free, and then we still had our meal money and our show money. That's the only way I'd keep a little bit of cash on me.
Mm-hmm.
But Birmingham, he did some crazy things. He got real drunk one night, and we walked down the hallway, and we were in a hotel. A lot of times we stayed in motels,
Mm-hmm.
but we stayed in a hotel the one night. He's so drunk, he just walked down the hallway naked, you know, and I'm like, man, you're going to get arrested. You're crazy. And he didn't care. He walked down the hallway naked. He didn't care. Yeah.
He's like, somebody's got to promote our next game.
Yeah. You know, hustling girls on the road. We got to meet a lot of women. That was another thing that happened. You had to literally hit and run,
Uh-huh.
because we didn't stay in any town over 24 hours.
Yeah.
Just the one time. So you got hooked up with some lady, man, you better take care of business real quick because it's time to go.
Back to Birmingham, Sam. You said he could pitch, he could catch, he could play any position on the field except for mine.
Right.
What was his best position?
Shortstop. But, I mean, he could play anywhere. One of the best ball players I've ever played with. Shortstop was his main position,
Mm-hmm.
but he pitched, he caught, he played everything pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, he was a shortstop.
And he wasn't a switch hitter, but he would mess with the pitcher before the pitch came by standing backwards in the batter's box until the pitcher was about to release the ball and then jump around at the last moment and hit the ball. Where did he come up with that? Or was that something that had been done before?
Yeah, it was Ed Hemmons done that before.
Okay.
Most of the clowning and stuff that they did was basically they learned it through Ed Hemmons.
Uh-huh.
Because Ed Hemmons was a clown. And he could juggle and he could throw the ball between his legs and all that stuff.
In 1969, the Associated Press reported that Bryson had secured a spring training tryout with the Boston Red Sox Carolina League Winston-Salem franchise. The AP story incorrectly said the 29-year-old Bryson was only 23. Bryson said an injury earlier in the spring had led to the cancellation of a tryout with the Cincinnati Reds. What was the injury that he sustained that spring?
He got shot in the neck.
By?
So his buddy's brother. They got in an argument in the bar, and the guy jumped on him and had him down on the ground and literally shot him point blank in the neck. So it went here and it came out the back.
Dang.
So he was right-handed, so that was on his throwing arm. Kind of hampered his throwing, and he wasn't able to go to that tryout.
Yeah, I would say getting shot in the neck would be a hindrance to your throwing motion.
Yeah, and he still
How did he survive?
had a gun for an arm.
Yeah.
He could throw the ball, but at that point in time, that messed him up from playing for the Cincinnati Reds.
Yeah, understandably so.
And they drafted Dave Concepcion at that time.
We talked about shadow ball, and you already mentioned the rowboat routine, but can you describe what that is? You and Sam had a rowboat routine that you would do during the seventh inning of games. What was that?
Yeah, basically we would just grab 2 bats each. So we use the bats as oars. So like we're in a rowboat, we're fishing. So we just imagine that we're throwing our line out in the water, and we snag into a big fish, and all of a sudden our boat capsizes and we both fall out of the boat. I'm drowning, so I already have water in my mouth. Then he would start hollering, Junior, you okay? And he would like drag me off to the side, like on the shore. And then he'd lift my arm up, I'd squirt water, lift the other arm up, I'd squirt water, lift up my leg, I'd squirt water, lift up the other leg, I'd squirt water, and then he'd step on my stomach and I'd squirt the rest of it, and I'd jump up and chase him around the ballpark.
So you were miming all the boat and the fishing?
Yes.
Yeah. Were you out on the field?
Yeah, we usually do it right on the pitcher's mound.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, so we'd do it there. I'd chase him around the ballpark a bit. But yeah, mainly we did that on the pitcher's mound.
Cool. All right, another guy that you've brought up a couple times is Bobo. Nate Bobo Smalls was a pitcher who played for the Clowns from 1965 to 1986, a longer tenure than any other player ever had with the team. Bobo had a great fastball and a really good curveball, but what was probably most impressive about him was the size of his hands and the control he had while pitching, right?
Yes. He could line up three guys side by side. He'll take three baseballs in one hand, and he could throw a strike to the three guys that's lined up like catchers. But yeah, Bobo threw smoke. Of course, he was married and had kids, so he would always leave us for a couple weeks into the season because he had to go home to Danville, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
Then his wife would let him come back and hook up with us again. But
Mm-hmm.
Bobo was fast. He threw smoke. He mainly pitched.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was the Iron Man. He'd pitch every day.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, your arm's got to be sore. He didn't care. He just threw. He fired. He threw fastballs, curveballs, knuckleballs. He was real good.
Cool. Steve Anderson was a one-armed first baseman whose nickname was Nub.
Yep.
At age 6, he was hit by a truck and had his left arm amputated.
Steve Anderson actually didn't play with me. We played against him in South Carolina.
Okay.
He used to play for the Clowns.
Right.
But then when we toured down in the South Carolina, and then we played a couple of teams that he played, Rico Dawson, he and Rico played on a baseball team that we played against.
But you said that he could turn a double play and bat with one arm better than most players could with two. How did he do it?
Yeah, basically, like when he fielded the ball, as he's going to put the glove on his nub, the ball rolls out, he lets it roll down his chest.
Gotcha.
Kinda. So when he picked it up, then the ball comes out and he'd throw the ball. Same way when he batted, he just bat with one hand.
Wow.
He was good. He was a real good ball player.
Then you mentioned Rico Dawson. Rico was known for his flashy style and athletic ability. He was an outstanding hitter who batted over 400 in 3 different seasons at Sterling High School in Greenville, South Carolina. While playing for the Greenville Black Spinners after his college career, Dawson said he had, quote, a real good game playing in an exhibition against the Indianapolis Clowns. After that game, the Clowns offered him a contract to go on the road with them, which he did for 2 seasons, and then his association with the team led to him being recommended as an extra for the Bingo Long movie. Despite having no acting experience, Dawson impressed the director so much that he was given the speaking role of second baseman Willie Lee Shively. So I guess after he was done playing with the Clowns, he moved back home.
Yeah, because he worked for Ma Bell.
Oh, okay.
He was the telephone guy.
Uh-huh. Even though the Clowns were a historically black baseball team who used to play in the Negro Leagues, when you were playing with them, not every member of your team was black, right?
Right.
How many players on your team were not black?
I would say probably half.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. We had a couple of Hispanic guys, but mainly, yeah, our team was basically half.
In 1968, the Clowns acquired their first white player, Jim Cohen, starting the integration of the team. That year, Ed Hammond also introduced several other changes to keep the team in business. The roster was reduced to 10 or 11 players, the schedule was reduced to 65 or 75 games, and the Clowns started playing in smaller cities. What were the teams that you were playing against? They weren't clowning also, right?
No, they were just mainly the local teams. You know, we played against some American Legion teams. We played against semi-pro teams. There was occasionally that we might play against a minor league team, but mainly it was the city teams there.
Gotcha. You saw plenty of racism during your travels, but tell me about a doubleheader in Johnson City, Tennessee.
We had a doubleheader there. Game was at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So we got there about an hour before game time. And we just practiced before the game. And then once the game started, there were some guys behind the home plate that were like heckling and calling you names and that. It was the Ku Klux Klan. And then at night, we played the second game, and it went into the evening. And then after the game was over, then when we're leaving, we were actually being escorted out of the ballpark by the Klan. Now, they didn't do anything as far as physically touching anyone, but they just let you know that, you know, at sundown, you got to go. Yeah. So they made sure we left town, you know.
How do you react to something like that?
Yeah, basically.
What do you do?
I just said, I'll let my bat do the talking, you know. So there was times that, like I said, you know, we'd have people heckling while you're up the bat, calling you names and what have you. And then after the game's over, they want to come and shake your hand and say, hey, you guys played a good game, or you're a good ball player. I I didn't kibitz with those guys.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when they wanted to come up to talk to me, I didn't want to talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I just said, hey, I got to go,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And then Birmingham says, hey, you need to talk to some of these guys. They could be a scout. They can just razz you behind the backstop just to see how much you can take.
Mm-hmm.
That you got to watch out because these guys could be scouts. And I took it with a grain of salt. And I realized that maybe these guys are scouts.
Yeah.
You know?
When the Clowns were playing teams in the Roy Hobbs League, you played on a Native American reservation in Wisconsin. Tell me about that day.
Oneida, Wisconsin. And even the Indians were acting real prejudiced against us, calling us names and everything. And yeah, it was kind of wild that the Indians was really like that. I mean, they were doing racism, and they're the ones that got discriminated against more. No, they were up in Oneida, Wisconsin. Oh, yeah, they called us everything.
Hmm.
And they were drunk, and they're drinking right at the game, and they're calling you names and so on. But, yeah, that was kind of weird, you know, to deal with racism from Indians,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
How do you not carry that anger or frustration onto the field with you? Were you able to separate what you were going through off the field from what you were doing on the field so it wouldn't affect your play?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I just block it out. When it's time to play ball, it's time to play ball.
Mm-hmm.
After the game, it's a different story.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, during the game, it's just strictly baseball.
I know it was never the Clowns' intention to embarrass the other teams with their clowning, but I also know how competitive sports can be and how riled up some guys get when they lose a game when it's being played straight. But then add in the fact that you guys were clowning, and it wouldn't be too hard for me to imagine a scenario where a player or two from the other team might feel some type of way about being beaten in front of his girlfriend or his family or his friends by a team like yours, which might have seemed like it wasn't taking the game seriously because of the performances and the routines. Were there ever any instances where you kind of had to remind your opponents like, hey, we're all just here to put on a good show and have a good time, or was everyone kind of in on it from the first pitch?
No, there a lot of guys from the other teams and even people in the stands would try to get into the act.
Mm-hmm.
There was a couple loudmouth guys in the stands that would say things, and the people in the stands would start laughing, and Birmingham or Bobo would go up there and start clowning with them and grab them, kiss a bald-headed man on the head or so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, I mean, it rarely did, you know, the fans get insulted.
Mm-hmm.
They just figured it was part of the act.
But I don't even necessarily mean the fans. I mean the players
The
on the
players.
other teams. Like, if you're beating a team 12-2 and you're also, like, goofing around during the game, did they take offense to that?
I don't think so. I don't recall any other run-ins with ball players.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall any of that.
Mm-hmm.
They were pretty good about things.
Cool. Some people today are aware of the Negro Motorist Green Book, which was a guidebook for African-American travelers that provided a list of hotels, boarding houses, taverns, restaurants, service stations, and other establishments throughout the country that served African-American patrons. Did your team have anything similar that you consulted on road trips?
No, we just went wherever, and if we were accepted, we were accepted. If we weren't, then we had to keep moving.
Mm-hmm. So what were some of the obstacles that you and your teammates faced when it came to eating in restaurants?
Oh, yeah. They would just basically tell us that we're out of this or we're out of that, or this is what we have. This is what the black people can eat.
Mm-hmm.
This is what the white people can eat. So, you know, if you didn't like it,
Mm-hmm.
leave.
And how often would stuff like that happen?
Not real often. I mean, it was mainly in the South. You know, when we start heading down south, yeah, you're going to run into it. And I never faced any racism as a kid as I did when playing for the Clowns.
Mm-hmm.
It was tough from time to time. I mean,
Of course.
there was times where after we played a game and we'd go to a local establishment, there might be some guys that would kind of try to pick a fight or whatever. But then whoever the bar owner would be like, hey, you know, don't mess with these guys. They're here. You leave my bar or what have you,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Tell me about a hotel that you tried to stay at in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Yeah, we got in about 1 a.m. and George Long went in to get the keys and to the rooms and stuff. So in the meantime, we were just unloading the car, getting our stuff out of the car, and we're walking into the hotel. And the guy at the desk said, "These guys with you?" And he goes, "Yes, that's my ball team." He says, "Well, I'm going to tell you right now, these guys can't stay here. No black guys can stay here. We don't allow blacks in this hotel."
But he was going to let the white players stay.
Yes, the white guys could have stayed there, but we couldn't. So George said, well, we're going to leave. So we left. We drove like 200 miles till we found another place that we could get a motel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then only to come back to Wilmington and play that evening.
Oh, my gosh.
You know, so yeah, it was kind of tough. We drove like 200 miles to find another place to stay, and then only to be able to come back and play in Wilmington.
Ugh. You almost don't want to come back to the town after that.
We didn't want to. Yeah.
Ugh. You're one of the kindest people I've met since moving to Cleveland. You're always smiling. You go out of your way to be supportive and to show up for people. Forget how being treated that way might have affected your play on the field immediately after it happened. How could it be that you went through that type of treatment and came away without hating people in general?
I never said I didn't hate anybody. No, I mean, as far as being discriminated against, I mean, that was just the way of life. I mean, even to this day, there's a lot of discrimination. So, I mean, it's
But doesn't that make you cynical? Like, of course there's discrimination, but you seem like you're so upbeat and chipper and just like you're always in a good mood. And like I said, like you didn't know who I was. You came up to me and shook my hand and introduced yourself. Like you didn't need to do that.
No.
How can you still be the way that you are?
Well, I just treat people the way I want to be treated.
Yeah.
I have nothing against anyone unless you say something that offends me.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm not offended by anyone, then I'm fine. If I get offended, I will let you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like I'm going to let you know because we're on a fight. You know, I'm just going to let you know how I feel and deal with it, you know.
Yeah. The instance that you just described in Wilmington, why did you drive so far? Why didn't you guys just sleep in the car? Because you said that there were times where you would sleep in the car, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how would you decide when you would try and sleep in the car and when you wouldn't? Like, did you guys feel like, okay, Wilmington might not be the safest place for us to pull over on the side of the road with half a car full of black people? Like,
yeah, I guess we didn't think about that. But we did get what we call riding money.
right.
You got $5 of meal money,
Uh-huh.
and then you got an extra $2 if we didn't stay in a hotel or a motel. That's riding money.
Mm-hmm.
But that instance, we did get riding money just for that occasion and still get a motel. Yeah, normally you just got your $2 and we slept in the car.
And how often would your team be forced to sleep in the car because you couldn't find a hotel?
Probably several times a week.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, because like if we travel, I mean, especially there's times when we're traveling through the night. So we're not getting a hotel.
Right.
We're just traveling, say, 400 or 500 miles. And we just slept in a car. We get to where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
And we might pull off into the ballpark and just finish sleeping in the car till the sun rises and so forth.
So in instances like that, where would you guys shower and dress before the game?
A lot of times we didn't.
Dang.
If we went to a ballpark that actually has running water or a bathroom or whatever, yeah, we'd change and shower or not even really shower, just kind of wash up.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you didn't. Unless there was a decent facility that we went to where you did have a shower, a locker room, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Rarely did that happen. Only time you got to shower is if you got back to the hotel or a motel, then you got to shower. Other than that, there's times, man, you didn't get to put any water on your face for a week.
Yeah.
Rarely did you even get a chance to even brush your teeth sometimes, you know.
Did the car have air conditioning or heat?
No.
Dang. So you're driving around for a week at a time without showering and playing all these games and...
Guys are smelling.
Yeah. You said George Long smelled. I think you guys probably smelled too.
Yeah.
What happened if someone missed the team bus?
Well, you would be called a hog cutter. If you missed the bus, chances are you're not going to be playing for us anymore. Because that was just the way it was.
Uh-huh.
We would pick somebody up along the way, you know. We'd find a guy off the street.
Uh-huh.
If you don't own a glove, we'll give you a glove, you know. But you got to get your own shoes. But, yeah, we'd pick up people off the street.
After you played your first season with the Clowns in 1977, you went to Sioux Empire College in Hawarden, Iowa. A few of your teammates were guys you traveled with on the Clowns, right?
Yes.
And who were they? Big George was a pitcher who was kind of like J.R. Richards?
Yes.
Greg Stockton, the catcher?
Yes.
And Mike Coco, the second baseman?
Yeah.
Were those the only guys that played with you on both teams, or were there more?
Yeah, pretty much. Mark Glatter, he played with us a little bit for the Clowns. We played in his hometown and picked him up, and he traveled with us for a little bit. And then he played baseball at Sioux Empire.
Cool.
But, yeah,
Who was your coach while you played there?
Bob Serve.
Bob Cerv played Major League Baseball from 1951 through 1962, most notably spending 9 seasons with the Yankees, winning a World Series with the team in 1956, and being named an All-Star in 1958 as a member of the Athletics. In the 2 years that you played for Bob Cerv, did he tell you stories about what it was like to not only be teammates with Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris, but to be roommates with them?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, tell me some of those stories.
They're basically women's stories. Because he told me a lot of stories that I don't know if I can even tell you on,
What other stories do you remember hearing from Bob Cerv, whether it was about famous ball players that he played with or other athletes that he coached or what life in the major leagues was like? What was it like spending 2 years around a guy who had spent that much time not only in the big leagues but winning World Series and playing with the Mount Rushmore of players from the 1960s?
Yeah, he had a lot of good stories, mainly like the bar fights. Billy Martin would start the fights, and then they would end up fighting in the bar and getting a beer bottle whacked over your head, and all because of Billy Martin's mouth. So that happened quite a bit. Also, he wrecked his knee once in a game, and he was in the hospital. He was having a little affair with Angie Dickinson. So she was listening to the game on the radio, and she had heard that Bob Cerv got hurt and was at the hospital. So she goes rushing to the hospital, goes into his room. "Oh, Bob, I'm so sorry to hear about you." And his wife was right there, So he has to introduce Angie to Phyllis. Phyllis, this is Angie, and so on and so forth. But yeah.
So is Angie just like, "I'm a big fan"?
Yeah, I don't know how that happened afterwards, but yeah, his wife was really upset about that.
Yeah, I bet.
But she knew. Yeah, he had said that she knew that the ball players, they all messed around with other women. And it was just one of those things that if you were a wife of a ball player, you had to accept it. Otherwise, you got a divorce.
Right.
But, yeah, he would tell a lot of stories. He would say, "You know who Rigor Saram is?" That was Roger Maris backwards.
Okay.
He would. But he had so many stories about Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle. And Mickey would get drunk all the time. I guess he really was a pretty heavy boozer and stuff.
You could say that.
But he was one of the fastest guys ever.
Yeah.
He ran from home to first in 3.1 or 3.2.
And, Mickey's whole career, he played basically on a bum knee because the World Series, his rookie year, he stepped in that drain pipe in the outfield. The stories about how fast he was before that happened are otherworldly. Like, people couldn't believe how fast he was.
Right.
It's crazy. And to think that he still was the base runner that he was, the bunter that he was, the fact that he had as many stolen bases as he did, and he was doing that all on one leg his whole career. People ask all the time, if you had a time machine or if you could, flip a switch and give one player a career that played out the way it should have instead of with injuries or, Mickey's always the first guy that comes to mind, that he still hit 536 home runs. Imagine what he could have done if he wasn't drunk half the time because he was dealing with injuries and just trying to ease the pain.
Right. And the same thing happened. The story he mentioned when Don Larson threw his no-hitter.
In the World Series,
Yeah, he had gotten drunk that night. Passed out.
The night before.
The night before.
Yeah.
Passed out. And Casey Stengel would always put a baseball in your spikes if you're pitching. So they got to the clubhouse that day, and the ball's in Don Larson's shoe. And here's Don Larson passed out at the hotel. So they had to get back to the hotel, get him, throw him in the shower, get him there because he's pitching, and he pitched the perfect game.
Yeah. Bob Cerv wanted everyone on your team to bat with an open stance. Why was that?
So you can see the ball. Because he figured you got to play baseball with two eyes. You can't see it with one eye. So he just said, open your stance up. You see it coming at you. You're going to see it with both eyes. So that's the way you're going to hit the ball.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never heard it described that way, but it makes sense. Yeah. All right, so we talked about what would happen if a player missed the team bus for the Indianapolis Clowns. What would happen if a player missed a sign playing for Bob Cerv?
Oh, yeah, he would tell the other team. And that happened quite a bit because I went from center field to left field because we brought in another recruit, Belvy Kennerly. And, we'd bat 1 and 2. And we always bunted. And we just got tired of bunting, and we act like we missed the sign. And we'd swing and hit the ball or whatever. He would just blow up on us. I don't care if you got a hit or got a home run. I gave you the bunt sign. I want you to bunt the damn ball. That's what he'd say, And he would tell the third baseman or first baseman, hey, I gave him the bunt sign, and he better be bunting. If he misses my sign again, he's going to be sitting next to me. Now you got the first baseman and the third baseman looking down your throat. He would tell the other team, if he missed the sign, he'd tell them, hey, he just missed a sign. I gave him the bunt sign. I'm going to give it to him again. So, yeah. He's a tough coach, but he was very good.
Was he the best coach you ever played for?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
When a player had played in the big leagues or had played at a high level, was it easier to listen to what they were saying because you knew that they knew what it took?
Yes. And like I said, along with his stories, I mean, he had a lot of things as far as batting, fielding, base running. He knew it all. And I just listened to the man. He was very easy to listen to because, you know, he had been there.
Not only been there, but he was wearing some jewelry too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, he'd been where I wanted to go.
Yeah.
So it was hard to ignore him.
In 1971, Indianapolis Clowns players received no salary and received just $4 a day in meal money. By the time you were on the team 6 years later, you were being paid $5 a day in meal money. But Jay, you personally earned an extra $5 because, like we said before, you were on the shadow ball routine and part of the show. And like we said before, if you guys didn't get a hotel or a motel at night, you'd each get $2 more of what was called riding money for sleeping in the car. Did that feel like enough money, $10 or $12 a day?
No, it didn't. But you couldn't spend it. I mean, because you're busy playing ball.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it was one of those things that if you weren't a heavy smoker or a heavy drinker, then you had money. See, Birmingham Sam, he always drank old granddad bourbon.
But he was also making $300 a day golfing.
Yeah,
you know?
yes, and he smoked cigarettes too. So a lot of times he didn't have money, but he got paid a salary too for playing for the Clowns. I don't know how often he got paid, if they just did it in one lump sum, but yeah, he got paid and Bobo got paid. They got paid more money, and I don't know if it was $400 or $500, but it was in the hundreds. Put it that way.
Yeah.
But it was tough to spend your money the little bit of money you had. It was tough to spend it.
So were you paid in cash on the spot each day, or how were you guys actually receiving the money that you were being paid?
Yeah, right on the spot.
Were there ever any problems with money? Would teams try to stiff you on the road if they'd say, oh, we're splitting the gate, but only 200 people showed up today, and you guys look out in the stands, you're like, no, there's 1,100 people out there. Like,
yeah.
Did teams try to play that game with you?
Not really, because George Long had that established. A lot of times we did get paid by the gate. Sometimes they just paid us a flat rate. And then there's times that how many people was in attendance, yeah, we did split the pot.
How would it work? Because like you said, George would only be with you guys for a couple of weeks during the season, so I'm assuming he handled the money when he was physically there, but when he wasn't traveling with you, how did it work splitting the gate money with the other team that you played? Would they give it to one of you, and then you were responsible for handing it out appropriately to the guys and then saving the rest for George, or would they send money back to George? Like, how did that all get handled?
Yeah, he kind of made Coco kind of like the manager. So when George wasn't traveling with us, everything went through Coco. You know, we'd get the money from the gate, and then Coco would pay us whatever.
Yeah.
And then George would also wire us money. He'd wire it to the post office or whatever.
Or Western Union or
Western
whatever.
Union,
Yeah.
So then we just go pick up the money and disperse the money or pay for the car to get it fixed or what have you.
Yeah, it seems like kind of no matter what the arrangement was, there had to be a lot of trust involved there, especially when George wasn't around for most of the season.
Yes.
When a major league team would sign a player from the Indianapolis Clowns, the owner of the team would get 2% of the value of the major league contract that the player would sign as a kickback. So when the Braves signed Henry Aaron for $10,000, the owner of the Clowns got a couple $100. So was it in the best interest of the owner of the team to get guys signed?
Oh, yeah.
He'd kind of be at a catch-22, though, because that means he's sending his best players away, and then how do you fill their void?
You were going to be replaceable. And George Long made that known. Everybody's replaceable. Birmingham Sam's replaceable. You're replaceable. If you don't hit, I can't feed you. You know, and that was kind of his thing. You don't hit, I can't afford to feed you.
Yeah.
That's what he told us.
What was your favorite city to play in, whether it was with the Clowns or some other point during your career?
It was fun in Grand Junction, Colorado.
In that thin air up there?
The thin air, yeah. It's the first time I had 2 misjudged fly balls.
Yeah, if you've never played in thin air like that, the first time is different.
It was very different.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like in the first inning, too, of a game. guy hits a line drive, and I'm coming in on it. And that thing just kept going. And it landed at the base of the wall, you know.
And you're coming in. Your first step was in because you thought it was going to drop in front of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other time was just a fly ball. And I'm thinking, hey, I got it right here. And jeez, man. I mean, and again, it fooled me so much that, I mean, I never even got a glove on it because I'm looking at a routine fly ball, and next thing you know, it's like, whoa, man, this, you know. Yeah, it was tough. After that, everything was fine.
But even with those 2 miscues, that's still your favorite city to play in?
Yeah, it was fun.
Did they just have a nice ballpark?
We played there. Yeah, a nice ballpark. It was a nice facility.
Mm-hmm.
The Grand Junction Eagles. They were college ball players. Home for the summer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, guys playing at Arizona State. Yeah, the people were nice. Ball players were nice. Paul Molitor played for the Grand Junction Eagles. He just got called up like 2 weeks before we played against the Grand Junction Eagles.
Cool.
So that was kind of weird, you know.
Yeah. But I'll bet that made everybody feel good that, like, it can happen for us.
It can happen,
yeah.
The competition was really good.
Yeah.
Like I said, we played against all Division I ball players.
Mm-hmm.
They were just home for the summer and playing. And you could just kind of judge yourself with those guys.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I knew I was at that caliber.
Mm-hmm.
So that was always real good competition. And I'm sure you've heard of Red Shandy's.
Of course,
Red Shandy's. Played baseball against his son, Kevin, and we went out and drinking and stuff together afterwards. And that was in Grand Junction. But Kevin Shandy's wasn't that good a ball player. He basically got in on his name.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Bob Serve, he used to coach in Liberal, Kansas. Every year in the summer he would coach.
Interesting, okay.
And he had Steve Bartkowski.
Oh, yeah.
He played baseball for Bob Serve. He has a kind of a permanent scar on his face. And that was from an aluminum bat exploding.
Whoa.
Yeah, where he hit the ball and the bat exploded and cut him on his face.
Wow.
So that was like the scar that he has on his face. But yeah, he had Ron Guidry, Steve Bartkowski. Those are 2 of the guys that he had at one time on his team.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite ballpark to play at? Was it Grand Junction, Colorado?
Actually, we played in a lot of the minor league ballparks.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some nice ballparks. So I didn't really have a favorite ballpark, even after the Clowns. And I played summer baseball when I was in college. Our ballpark was a pretty nice ballpark,
Mm-hmm.
Packer Stadium. That used to be the Cincinnati Reds A-ball. Used to play the Sioux Falls Packers. So Ken Griffey Senior,
right, yeah.
played there. And he got chased home several times after ball games by white guys in a truck. Yeah, racism. They would chase him. He was fast. But yeah, there was a story about that Ken Griffey used to get chased all the time.
Jeez.
You know.
What was the condition of the fields that you would play on? Obviously, the ones that were minor league stadiums were nice, but were there other fields that you never knew what way a ball was going to hop on the infield and maybe you're stepping in a puddle in the outfield or anything like that?
Yeah, down south.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we played down in the south, the fields were pretty crappy. I know this one ballpark that we played in, I mean, it was like a cow pasture. It was really bad.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, you'd have to watch it because you could sprain an ankle pretty easy.
Especially for you guys, an injury can be the difference between playing on the team and being sent home.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there were some bad conditions. But, yeah, for the most part, like I said, most of the ballparks were pretty well maintained.
What would happen if there was bad weather in a town when you got there? But let's say you had another game scheduled later that day 200 miles away. Would you just skip it?
No, basically, if it was raining, we're going to play rain or shine.
Mm-hmm.
We're playing.
Uh-huh.
Who cares if it's mud and all that? Because if it's a delay even, if it's a rain delay,
it's going to throw your entire schedule
throw
off.
us off.
Yeah,
If the other team wants to call a game, that's fine. But we have to play.
Yeah. You guys would always let the other team
Make the call.
Yeah. You played in the 48th and 49th season of the Clowns' existence, and you wanted to come back and play in their 50th season, but there just wasn't enough interest to keep the team going. So you played for the Clowns in 1977, and then after that you played at Sioux Empire College, then came back for another season with the Clowns in 1978, and then one more season with Bob Serve at Sioux Empire College. And then in 1979 and 1980, you played for Sioux Falls College, which is now the University of Sioux Falls.
Mm-hmm.
While you were going to college and playing ball, I mean, you already had experience as a professional ball player. Did you think that's what you were going to do after you graduated?
No, speech communications and theater was my major. So I said, yeah, after my baseball career, I'm either going to be an actor or a reporter or,
Mm-hmm.
somewhere with sports or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. There's going to be a microphone in front of me.
Uh-huh.
Well, that didn't happen, but I did have the opportunity, so.
Mm-hmm. Was there one particular experience you wish you would have been able to have on the baseball field, but you just never got a chance to have it?
No, none.
That's pretty
But
cool.
I mean, I wasn't a home run hitter,
Mm-hmm.
but I did hit a grand slam before, and that's the greatest feeling.
Where did that happen?
That happened in Sioux Falls.
Cool.
Yeah, I was at Sioux Falls College.
So it was in front of your home crowd?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
Did the place go crazy?
No, we have a good turnout. Our summer league was really, really big.
Mm-hmm.
But this was at Sioux Falls College when I did that.
Mm-hmm. What was the best part about being a ball player for the Indianapolis Clowns?
Probably the freedom. Yeah.
In terms of what? Like, how do you mean?
No one's going to tell you, hey, to get up at this specific time or go to bed at this time or do this, do that. I mean, you did whatever you wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So
did that kind of force you to grow up?
yeah, just a lot of growing up on the road.
Yeah.
A lot of growing up, yeah. You had to discipline yourself. I mean, no one's going to tell you what to do. You're going to do whatever you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, that's just the freedom. And that was probably the main thing. You hit it on the head, was just being able to grow up,
Mm-hmm.
being on your own.
Okay, and then flip side, what was the worst part about being a player for the Indianapolis Clowns?
Not getting paid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
$12 a day, $13 a day, even if you weren't even really spending it, it still doesn't seem like it's enough money to
Right.
live.
I'd play for nothing, but
Yeah, of course. That's why you did it.
yeah.
But you still should have been compensated.
Compensated for more.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but that was the only thing, is that you're playing for the Indianapolis Clowns and you're getting paid. So realistically, you don't have a college eligibility,
Right.
But who's to say?
Mhm.
It was like, yeah, I'm playing for the Clowns and then I'm playing college ball.
Mhm.
And I go back and play for the Clowns again and I'm getting paid.
Yeah.
Well, you're considered a professional, but no one ever squealed on us.
Yeah.
But that was one thing that Bob Serve would do. He would never, ever even give you change for $1 because he was so worried about the recruiting rules
Mm-hmm.
and paying stipends and stuff for the ball players. Like, 'cause I asked him for a change for $1 one day, and he said no. And I'm like, what? He goes, I can't do that. If we get caught, I'm done, you're done, the season's done.
Yeah.
And I'm like, really? He goes, oh, yeah, you got to watch that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you most proud of in life?
My accomplishments, what I've done. I've been there, done that.
Are you talking baseball or are you talking other?
I'm talking about life in general.
Yeah.
Sure, I wanted to be in the major leagues. Did I make it to major leagues? No, but I went further than most people.
You got paid to play baseball.
I got paid to play the game I love.
Yeah.
Pretty
good.
Was it a lot? No, it wasn't a lot. But
Don't let the details get in the way.
It's something
You got
I would-
paid to play baseball.
Exactly. Yeah.
You traveled around. You saw the country.
So it's one thing. I saw the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For better or worse.
Yep. To this day, there's only a few states that I've never been.
Do you know what they are off the
Yeah,
top
I
of
know
your
they
head?
are.
What are they?
Washington State, Oregon, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont. Other than that, I've seen them all.
That's pretty cool. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you'd like to speak about, or anything that you want people to take away from listening to you talk?
I've had people in interviews ask me, what would I tell myself? What kind of advice would I give myself
Mm-hmm.
if I was a younger ball player again? It's like I said, I've done everything that I've planned to do. I take the game serious. I eat, sleep, drink baseball. And where I missed it, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be at the right place at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in Fort Lauderdale, Florida at 18. And I don't know. I came back home, graduated with my class, and then my college career started a year after I was out of school. I got a letter from the Baltimore Orioles that said, hey, Bob Serve is the coach at Sioux Empire College, and we'd like to have you come there. Pack and go.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there within 2 weeks. Didn't know where I was going. And again, my sister drove me out to Iowa, dropped me off, and I'm out of college. I didn't take no SATs, ACT tests. They didn't do a college entrance exams.
Uh-huh.
They just said, go to Sioux Empire College in Hayward, Iowa. And
I'll be there.
I was there.
Yeah.
That's where I was at. One of the greatest coaches, the greatest ball players that ever played the game was my coach. And that's what I probably enjoyed the most.
Yeah, that's pretty
playing.
cool. How nice was your sister, though, that on at least 2 different occasions, she just drove you to Iowa for a baseball thing? Like,
Yep.
It's
Yeah.
nice to have.
Yep. Because my brothers were all a little older,
Uh-huh.
but my sister was still living at home, and she had a car, and her and my brother drove me to Iowa on 2 different occasions.
Pretty cool.
Yep.
How can people reach out to you and keep up with what you're doing these days? Are you on social media at all, or?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. That's about the only thing.
All right. Always nice to talk to a former ball player and hear some old stories, and you've got some interesting ones. So
Yeah, there's more.
I can keep rolling. You tell me whatever you feel is appropriate to say to the public.
No, I'm pretty good at this point. There's so many stories that just pop up in your head.
Well, thank you very much for sitting down with me.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Now it's time for a segment called What'd You Think, Mom?, where we talk to my mom, who just listened to the interview with me, and we ask her what she thinks. This is my real, actual mom. Her name is Lori, but I've always just called her Mom. Can you say something to prove that you are my mom?
Yes, I've been lucky enough to have gone along on a lot of your quest to hit all 50 states, and I've enjoyed every minute of all the road trips we've taken, mostly every minute. The road trips we've taken. When you leave me on the side, you have to come back and get me. That's not so cool, but.
Yeah, me too, Mom. All right, so what did you think of the Jay Valentine interview and episode?
We're about the same age,
Mm-hmm.
Jay and I just kept thinking how interesting it was, the path his life took, and what his life journey was. Just being in a certain place at a certain time, having talent,
Mm-hmm.
and having a supportive family, and what an interesting life he led because of that.
I thought it was very interesting, Jay describing the house he stayed at in the Florida Instructional League. It sounds like a bachelor's paradise, didn't it? I mean, you got 7 guys staying in one house with no curtains, no beds, 4 miles away from where you work with no transportation to get there. You had to pay your way down to get there in the first place, but you're playing baseball, and you're there for a chance to make a major league team. So that's the trade-off.
Yeah.
Sleeping on the floor for 8 weeks, but you might make an MLB roster at the end of that.
And you have a friend who has a conversion van with curtains, so.
That only he stays in, though.
Yeah,
He's not letting you sleep in there. We asked at one point, did the amount of money he was making seem like enough? He's like, no.
Right.
But you might be a major leaguer. That's what the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is. You share the field with Reggie Jackson, and you know where he's playing at the end of the spring training. So do you become one of the lucky ones that gets to go on the team playing with him at the end of those 8 weeks?
Yeah. Just to be able to say you shag balls for those players.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to being in the right place at the right time, Curtis Wallace just making a comment of how he's going to play for the Clowns again if he doesn't make the single A team. Just that little comment completely changed the life path of Jay. And again, his family having faith, sister and brother take him in the car. And just listening to so many of the different aspects of the logistics of living in the 1970s, as he's speaking, I'm thinking, I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
There was no GPS.
Mm-hmm.
You had to know how to read a map. And when he talked about having a map of all 50 states when they're driving around all over the place to play baseball,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was that way. And if your map wasn't good enough,
Mm-hmm.
that could have been an adventure in itself. And especially with the team composition that they had in some of the places they were traveling, it
Mm-hmm.
was an adventure and not the best adventure.
Mm-hmm.
I hated hearing those stories.
Yeah, hearing about how these teams traveled is just always so wild to me. Squeezing all these guys into one vehicle with no air conditioning, no leg room, and only a couple changes of clothes for a 3-month road trip, essentially. Who knows how often laundry was being done on their street clothes, let alone their uniforms, which had to have been crazy dusty or dirty or smelly.
Right.
Without being able to necessarily shower every day, without necessarily being able to eat a true meal some days.
Yeah.
But that would have been any baseball team traveling around like that. Then you add in the fact that the Indianapolis Clowns, or teams in the Negro Leagues, had to deal with the racism on top of that.
Yeah.
And being on the road must have been the absolute hardest part about being a ball player for those teams at those times.
Especially for someone who didn't grow up with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I am so happy he didn't grow up with that. But then to be thrown into that and you're thinking, what is going on in this world,
Mm-hmm.
that he's being exposed to?
I grew up in the 90s, and all of my idols were black athletes, all of them. Michael Jordan, Vince Carter after MJ, Tiger Woods was the best golfer. So racism never made sense to me anyways. But what has never made any sense to me is when people in the South will cheer for black athletes while the game is going on. You're on my favorite team. I love you. I'll root for you. But as soon as that final whistle blows, now I'm going to call you some names.
Right.
I've never understood how they can have that disconnect. And Jay kind of seemed like he saw that as well when he was telling the Ku Klux Klan story about how these guys would come up after the game and talk to him or say nice game or ask for an autograph or something like that. But then a half hour later, they've got hoods on.
Right. They're escorting you out of their city because the sundown rule.
Right.
Right.
And we're not talking about the 1920s here.
That's just it.
I mean, this is 50 years ago. Not even. 1977 and 1978.
Right.
It's just inexcusable and incomprehensible that somebody that I know and went over to his house dealt with this.
And as you said, it's still going on today.
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
In listening to some of the stories and being taken back to what life was like before the microwave, and when he flew to Fort Lauderdale that very first time, and it was the first time he was on a plane, and he's emotional leaving his family, and his dad can come on the plane.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way it used to be, and that was such a sweet story from both sides, that he was going to miss his family, and it was hard to say goodbye. But that his dad came on and like, are you okay?
Yeah.
Are you all right?
Yeah, get off the plane, Dad. Yeah.
Having your mail forwarded is one thing, but payphones and
Western Union,
having money wired to the post office or wherever.
Or having your mail forwarded. First of all, that you were getting physical mail, but then that you could have it forwarded to some random place.
Yeah.
Just wherever you were going to be on the road at that time. That was the value of having George Long stick around in Muscatine, Iowa, instead of traveling with the team, is that he could handle stuff like that. So for 3 months, his players could be reached and his players' families could be in contact with them and vice versa.
And the promotions, George Long walking the streets of the cities they were going to play in and stapling broadsides to the telephone poles.
Yeah, and Jay still has a handful of those broadsides, so we'll throw those up in the liner notes. He's got one that's signed by Birmingham Sam. Just seeing the pictures and seeing the old iconography and the way that things were used, that's always a very nostalgic thing.
How about AM radio? Can you imagine how long you and I would last in the car on some of our road trips? It's just the two of us, not 12, with just AM radio. But that was another thing when you were in a car in the middle of nowhere. That's what made WGN the power station, the 50,000 watt WGN, because different radio stations had the power to be transmitted, but you had to play the game of what's going to be,
just
where am I
searching
going to
for a
hear?
signal.
Right, searching for the signal.
Yeah.
And not being able to play cards, I would have a problem with that. If you're going to be in the car all that time.
He said there was no room, like none of them had laps. Like,
yeah.
You'd think you're in the car together for 3 straight months. I'd figure out a way to play a card game.
Yeah. Cardboard box or something.
Yeah.
Listening to some of the pranks that they would pull on each other, like driving away when someone is still outside the bus. And I'm just thinking, boys will be boys. We watched the Bingo Long movie. That was a great setup. It was really an interesting movie to watch, and especially helped inform me so much to what Jay was talking about. I don't know which I would prefer first, but so many of the people he talked about that were part of the team were represented in the movie. It was just a great snapshot of what was going on and just how players were at the whim of the owners sometimes. Kind of sounds like that a little bit with George Long, but I don't think exactly what was going on with what was portrayed in the movie.
And the movie was released in 1976, but the time period it was portraying was the 1930s.
Right.
So it wasn't quite supposed to be a modern day representation.
Yeah. But knowing that 3 of Jay's teammates played parts in the movie, that was interesting as well. And so when he was talking about Birmingham Sam, who had a nice role in the movie, that was pretty cool, just to put all that together.
Yeah, and I don't know if Jay mentioned this during the interview, but he has said to me a couple times that during that movie, anytime Billy D. Williams' character, there's a close-up of his hands gripping a baseball in the glove, or they're showing how he's going to throw the next pitch, those instances were always actually Birmingham Sam's hands being
Very
filmed.
Cool.
If you've never seen that movie, it is available to rent, or you can buy it on Amazon. but it's also just cheaper to find it someplace online and buy a DVD copy of
Yeah.
it. But yeah, it's worth watching. It's fun. The very opening scene before it even gets to the movie is an old newsreel. So that's cool, and seeing just like the goofy stories that they would tell on those newsreels, and then it goes into a newsreel of actual Negro League players and showing the Kansas City Monarchs playing in Yankee Stadium. So you've got Satchel Paige, and it's cool.
Yeah.
Definitely a movie worth watching, especially after you listen to this episode, and you'll kind of get the context and be able to see what's going on.
Right. They had some great little snippets of Shadow Ball that was so entertaining to watch.
And they showed a quick little clip of the rowboat routine that Birmingham Sam and Jay performed together. So if you have a chance to see it, it's definitely a movie worth checking out. It's one of those baseball movies that most people haven't seen.
Right, yeah.
Or even heard about for the most part. I have had that soundtrack on vinyl for 15 years. And I only bought the soundtrack because going to record stores, I always go to like the weird sections. And I'd flip through and see like it's baseball on the cover. So I was like, all right, cool. If it's baseball related, I'll get it.
Right.
I knew it was a movie, but I had never seen the movie until recently. So
yeah. I found it was interesting when Jay was talking about Steve Anderson, a one-armed ball player, and he said he was a real good ball player. And I'm thinking, he's doing all that stuff with only one arm. Think about just the logistics. And they showed a player like this in the movie. He fields the ball with his glove, drops the glove up on his shoulder, the ball rolls down, and then he's got it in his hand, and he still can make a play. Yeah, I think...
Some people are more coordinated than others.
Yeah.
A lot of people know the names Goose Tatum and Meadowlark Lemon, and some people even know that Wilt Chamberlain played for the Harlem Globetrotters. But for a world-famous team that's been around since 1926, it's clear that the players who have made up the Globetrotters for the 100 years have been legitimate athletes, and it's a shame that more of them aren't household names. And you could say the same thing with the Indianapolis Clowns. You hear Jay talk about how great Birmingham Sam was, for instance, saying that he was the best ball player he ever played with. 30 minutes after he said he shared a field with Eddie Murray, who is one of 7 players in history to have both 500 home runs and 3,000 hits in a career. That Birmingham Sam could play any position. He could throw between his legs as good as any other player could throw normally, and that he could turn around in the batter's box while the pitcher was throwing and still hit the ball. Yeah, he might have been clowning, but it's clear that he was an amazing athlete and a great ball player. And again, there are names of the Indianapolis Clowns players that have been or are becoming more well-known, like Henry Aaron or Tony Stone, Mamie Peanut Johnson, and Connie Morgan, but the vast majority of these names are long forgotten, and that's a shame.
It is a shame. That can go for so many players in the Negro Leagues.
Yeah, but I mean, when you talk about people who played in the Negro Leagues in general, even the guys who are Hall of Famers, their names aren't known.
Yeah.
People know Satchel Paige. People know Josh Gibson. Most people have heard the name Cool Papa Bell.
Right.
That's about it. And there's dozens of Hall of Famers who are Negro Leagues affiliated. I mean, I know the first step is getting them recognized with a plaque. And then when people go to Cooperstown, they can see those plaques and be like, oh, I need to learn more about this guy. But unless you go to Cooperstown, who's educating people about the players from this league? That's why I think the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in Kansas City is so important, and the Baseball Heritage Museum in Cleveland is so important, and the Southern Negro League Museum in Birmingham. And there are a couple institutions who are kind of leading the charge, but it's important for people to know who the black players were just as much as they know lesser known Hall of Fame white players, and even the superstar Hall of Fame white players. Those shouldn't be the only names that we know.
Right. And hopefully we're doing part of that by just talking about today.
I hope so.
And bringing Jay and his story to life as well.
Yeah, I hope so.
The play that you were describing being turned around at home plate was shown in the movie. And it's like you just take it for granted, like, oh, it's a stunt. But you still have to be able to do that.
Yeah.
There's still ability that is beyond the normal scope.
I like that he spent 2 years playing for Bob Cerv. And when I asked him, tell me some Bob Cerv stories, he was like, well, Angie Dickinson.
Yeah. As soon as he said that, I'm like, I need to see a picture of this Bob Cerv because wait a minute. And I don't know.
And then the drunken nights with Billy Martin and Mickey Mantle, like there was no baseball stories. It was all like, here's the crazy stuff that he told me about.
All that was all really going on. And basically Billy Martin's mouth meant there was probably going to be a bottle over someone's head as a result. And the Don Larson story was new to me, not to you, but to me. I didn't realize he was hungover and sleeping one off, and they go grab him and throw him out there in perfection.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a Yankee tradition to throw no-hitters in perfect games hungover, because David Wells did the same thing.
Did he?
Yeah.
Those Yankees.
Yeah.
When you asked Jay what he was most proud of, and he just said his life's accomplishments. getting paid to play in the game he loved, traveling, getting to the majority of the United States, good and bad. So here he is, this 18-year-old kid, and he gets on his plane and he goes to Fort Lauderdale, and he said he had to learn discipline. It was on him. You know, maybe they all partied and maybe they all were rabble-rousing or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But he was responsible for, you had to get up in the morning, you had to get your act together, you had to be out on the field, you had to have the discipline because there was no one else telling you what you needed to do. You needed to do it.
Mm-hmm.
What great life lessons.
Well, you didn't have to, but if you wanted to achieve your dream and the reason you were down there, then you had to.
Right.
But there are plenty of guys who don't have that discipline, and then they wind up back at home.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to have that experience, and you want to live out your dreams and maybe make the major leagues and maybe travel the country getting paid to play baseball, you better be at the field at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, it's kind of baptism by fire. You really just need to pull it all together and do what you need to do because it's all on you.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if you're 18 or 30 or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but really he was just a kid.
Yeah, if there's one thing these last few years should have taught us, it's that life is too short to not treat people well and to not do the things that make you happy. That seems like something that Jay has always kind of lived by. That he kind of follows his dreams and does whatever he needs to do to make them happen. And if people are supportive and along for the ride, then great. And if they're not, he just doesn't waste his time with them. And I think that can be an isolating way to live life sometimes, but it can also be a very healthy way to live life. And sometimes you just need to recognize when a person isn't going to be good for you and
surround yourself with kindness.
So Jay is a person I'm glad to have part of my life now here in Cleveland.
I hope to meet him.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. So thanks, Jay. Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, so that's it. In the introduction of this episode, I mentioned how there are a handful of ways for you to follow the podcast online. In addition to liking, subscribing, and giving My Baseball History a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast app, please make sure you're also following us on Facebook, Blue Sky, Twitter, and Instagram, where we are at Shoeless Podcast on each platform. By following us there, you'll get some bonus content throughout the month and you'll be able to interact with us to let us know what you think of the show. You can also sign up for Clearing the Bases, our email newsletter, by heading to shoelesspodcast.substack.com. We publish 2 newsletters a month, which allow us to talk about lots of things we don't normally talk about on the show. I'll use that space to talk about the podcast, of course, but I'll also use it to write about baseball road trips I go on, to publish research I do, and to speak on current events in baseball, all of which are things I don't really do in episodes of My Baseball History. We'll also have giveaway contests that are exclusively for our newsletter subscribers, giving you even more chances to win some cool stuff. Look for a new issue to be published on the 2nd Friday and the 4th Friday of every month. If you have questions about the podcast or research you'd like to contribute to a future newsletter, submit something through the contact form on our website or email us at shoelesspodcast@gmail.com. Before the interview with Jay, I mentioned a trivia question you can answer to win something, and here's how you can do that. First, make sure you're following us on Twitter or Blue Sky at Shoeless Podcast. Then, find the pinned post at the top of our profile with the link to the Jay Valentine episode, which asks this episode's trivia question. The answer to the trivia question was somewhere in this episode that you just finished listening to. Quote that post, along with your answer, and we'll announce the winner before the next episode of the podcast goes live. You don't have to be the first person to answer, you just have to be right. But make sure you're following us on your preferred social media platform or your entry won't be counted. We'll pick one person who answered correctly, and they'll win a custom Jay Valentine baseball card autographed by Jay. We also do a separate giveaway related to every episode through our email newsletter, and the winner of that contest gets a different prize. So make sure you're signed up for that, and you'll have a chance to win something else this month too. We now look back fondly on the Indianapolis Clowns and the style of baseball they played in the 1930s and 40s, but many Negro League players themselves deeply resented the comic image that the Clowns portrayed at the time. While their pranks and blatant showmanship made the club one of the most popular, especially during barnstorming exhibition games in front of largely white crowds, the team made a concerted effort to tone down their antics once they were admitted to Negro American League play. The Clowns finished as league runner-up in both halves of a single-division split season during their second league campaign of 1944. They rejoined the Independent League and won their first league championship in 1950. Then the Clowns won the Negro American League Championship in 1951, 1952, and 1954. The 1951 team featured a number of great players, including Jim Fireball Cohen, a right-handed pitcher who made his debut in 1946 and pitched for the team through 1952. Reynaldo Drake was a Cuban-born center fielder who played for and even managed the Clowns at points from 1945 through 1954. A native of Havana, Drake was selected to the East-West All-Star Game in 1953 and later played minor league baseball in Washington State. Ray Neal was the second baseman and played his entire career for the Clowns franchise, beginning in 1941 when they were still known as the Ethiopian Clowns. He moved with the team to Cincinnati in 1943 and played for the Indianapolis Clowns until he retired following the 1954 season. He was among the Negro American League's top batters in 1953. The 1952 championship squad also featured Buster Haywood, who played for the Clowns in both Indianapolis and Cincinnati. In 1941, the Clowns won 125 games during the regular season, as well as the postseason Denver Post Tournament, with Haywood winning MVP. He was primarily a catcher during his playing career, but he also managed both the Clowns and the Memphis Red Sox, and just so happened to be Henry Aaron's first professional manager on the 1952 Clowns. The Clowns had signed Aaron on November 20th, 1951, after local scout Ed Scott saw the skinny 17-year-old infielder. He didn't even know how to properly hold a bat, placing his lead hand on top until a coach corrected him and showed the eventual home run king how to produce more power. The kid from Mobile, Alabama only spent one season in the Negro Leagues before signing a contract with the Milwaukee Braves organization, leaving the Clowns after their 1952 championship season. Some other notable players on that 1952 team include outfielder Horace Garner, who, along with Henry Aaron and Felix Mantilla, integrated the South Atlantic League in 1953 when the trio played for the Jacksonville Braves. Garner spent 10 seasons in the minor leagues, batting .321 with 1,115 hits, 190 doubles, 37 triples, and 157 home runs in 997 games. Pee Wee Jenkins was a pitcher for the 1952 Clowns, who also spent part of that season with the Birmingham Black Barons. Jenkins had previously helped the New York Cubans win the 1947 Negro League World Series over the Cleveland Buckeyes. Jimmy Seabiscuit Wilkes played for the New York Eagles from 1945 to 1948. The outfielder was a member of the 1946 Negro League World Series championship team and was an All-Star in 1948. In 1949 and 50, Wilkes played for the Houston Eagles of the Negro American League. He then played minor league baseball in the Brooklyn Dodgers organization from 1950 through 1952. However, after appearing in only 9 games in that 1952 season, he returned to the Negro American League and spent the rest of the year with the Indianapolis Clowns, helping lead them to another championship. Wilkes subsequently played with the Brantford Red Sox of Southern Ontario from 1953 through 1963, with the Red Sox finishing as champions of the Intercounty Baseball League in 5 of those seasons. Wilkes is considered one of the top 100 players in league history. The Indianapolis Clowns needed to fill the vacancy left by Henry Aaron after he signed with the Braves following that 1952 season, and they made history in doing so, becoming the first professional baseball team to sign a female player to a long-term contract. Toni Stone was brought on to play second base with the team in 1953, and she batted .243. The following year, the Clowns sold her contract to the Kansas City Monarchs, but immediately signed 2 new women to join the team. Pitcher Mamie Peanut Johnson, who would go on to compile a record of 33-8 for the team while batting between .262 and .284, and second baseman Connie Morgan. Morgan went far to her right to make a sensational stop opening day of 1954, flipped to shortstop Bill Holder, and started a lightning double play against the Birmingham Barons. Morgan played with the Clowns through 1955, but before her tenure with the team, she played catcher for 5 seasons with the North Philadelphia Honey Drippers, an all-women baseball team, where she batted .338. But women didn't only play for the Clowns. Women also served as umpires for the team, most notably former Chicago model Nancy Miller, who was the first female umpire in pro ball. You may look at the broadsides and the imagery surrounding the Clowns, or see old video footage of their clowning and assume that the team wasn't serious. But their decades of success, long after the demise of the Negro Leagues, proves that they were an innovative, barrier-breaking operation. If you think this episode was worth $1, please click the donate button in the upper right corner of our website, shoelesspodcast.com. That is a direct link to my PayPal profile where you can make a donation in any amount. If you don't have PayPal and want to send a donation through Venmo, Zelle, Cash App, or any other platform, shoot me an email at shoelesspodcast@gmail.com and I'll send you directions for whichever method you prefer. You can also leave a rating or review on iTunes or wherever you listen to the podcast. 5-star ratings help our podcast get shown on more people's suggested podcast pages, which means that more people will hear our show. It just takes a couple seconds of your time, but it really helps us a lot. And of course, liking us on social media, interacting with our posts, and sharing things with your friends is great too. No matter how you choose to support us, even if it's just by listening, we appreciate you being here. Until next time, I'm Dan Wallach, and this is My Baseball History.